Yeah, perfect. Have we started, guys?
We certainly have.
Welcome, viewers. Welcome, everybody. We have an amazing team today. We have the one and only Brian, and we also have the one and only Alex. Amazing guys, very knowledgeable about geopolitics. We got a fantastic show for you today. So, Alex, take it away, and let's.
Wow. Well, AJ, I was looking forward to kind of just sitting back, relaxing tonight, and letting you run the show.
I thought you were going to start, then you didn't say anything, so that's all right.
Well, this is quite the honor here to be a guest on AJ's platform tonight, and of course, what a treat we have with Brian Berletic here. Now, as you already know, Brian has done amazing coverage on the Ukraine and Russia conflict, and it's really a treat to bring him on this program. We do what we can to bring on the experts because, as you know, in the collective West or the mainstream media, those experts left the show decades ago. I'm going to pass it over to Brian. Brian, maybe you can introduce to the audience a little bit about yourself, how amazing your channel has grown in the last few months, and well, tell us from the geopolitical side, what is your interest and your focus at this time?
Well, first of all, thank you, AJ, for having me on. It's an honor and a pleasure. It's also nice to be back on screen with you, Alex. I've actually had you on my channel.
Yes, thank you.
And yeah, I've been doing a lot of work about Ukraine, but what a lot of new subscribers don't know is that my main focus is actually Asia, Southeast Asia, and Thailand specifically, because that's where I live. And I got into geopolitical analysis out of necessity. I'm obviously interested in what's going on around the world, but I was a U.S. Marine. I woke up while I was a U.S. Marine. I realized what I was involved in, that this was not defending the U.S. This was perpetuating empire. I wanted nothing to do with it. I had been stationed in Asia the entire time, mainly Japan, but I had did a deployment to Thailand, and I figured, go back to Thailand. It was great. It was nice. And it would not be a bad place to go rather than stay in the U.S. I felt so strongly about what the U.S. was doing at that time. It was invading Iraq. This was 2003, 2004. And I felt so strongly about it. I didn't want to even be in the country. I didn't want to contribute or participate in even the most minor way. So I went to Thailand, which is almost completely on the other side of the planet. But over the years in Thailand, I realized that the U.S., its reach goes far, and it was meddling in Thailand. I started doing my research. I came across the National Endowment for Democracy. I saw all of these NGOs here in Thailand funded by the NED, and I started covering it around 2009, 2010, because that's when these color revolutions kicked off here. And then the next year, 2011, was the Arab Spring. And then that is where I was writing every single day at the time under a pen name. I was not doing videos back then. And that my work gained traction because people were interested in what was the money and the interests and the planning that went behind this supposedly spontaneous uprising. And then I realized that the danger in Thailand may have passed, but that was only temporary. Eventually, it was going to come back again. And so if I could educate people about what was going on in places like Libya, Syria, or in 2014 and onward, Ukraine, people would understand what was going on. Say if this turmoil came back to Asia, they would already know all of these phrases, these organizations, the way the funding works, and I wouldn't have to start from zero. So that is what has driven my work this entire time. If and when U.S. meddling and interference and even aggression revisits Asia, I want to be ahead of it. And that's why I do what I do. I'm laser focused on the situation in Ukraine because after Ukraine and Russia, the U.S. is going to move on to China. And there's a multitude of vectors that the U.S. can use to go after China. So I guess that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I think, Brian, we all owe you a debt of gratitude for your work. You have been absolutely amazing in spreading the truth and telling people how it really is. We need more people like you, and I just want to congratulate you on what you're doing, and I want you to kind of continue doing it as long as you can, because I think it's voices like us, which we are in the minority. You look at YouTube as as a platform, and there's millions and millions and even billions of channels out there, but you can actually count how many channels there are speaking the truth, and there's probably less than 10, I would say. Over to you, Alex.
I understand that point completely, AJ. Being based here in China comes with its little bit of difficulties, and I'm not talking about me on the ground here. I'm talking about all the brains that have been brainwashed in the Western countries, that immediately it is China bad, China bad, China bad, or China is an adversary. This is what the mainstream media has been pumping out to the to a majority of the easily led public. Now, what happens with that is it actually puts people like myself in a little bit of a danger. And I'm not looking for pity here. I'm trying to just be very clear with you that you can imagine, as a Canadian here living in China, reporting in China on quite a bit of different variety of things. Just like Brian, my focus is to pretty much show everything about China. That's whether it's in the streets, whether it's geopolitical, whether it's following a police crew around, filming them, because I do have a fair amount of contacts here and a fair amount of trust built. But when you try to relay this information to people that have or think they know, we'll call them the armchair warriors as well, or they're sitting in their basement coming up with an assumption, you can just imagine the type of emails or the threats that I would say pretty much everybody on this screen gets. Now, we understand that. That's okay. We know that we're here to, move forward and try to educate not only ourselves, but to also educate you, the viewers. And sharing the screen with Brian a few months ago, I could see that Brian could not leave this Ukraine-Russia thing. He had to see it through. He has dedicated hours and hours and hours. Once these cameras are off tonight, Brian is on to the research. Brian continues to go in depth, okay? Just like everybody that's sharing this channel here tonight, we do that. Other channels, the Duran, they do that. Patrick Lancaster, can you imagine this? Can you imagine the story that you would get out of Eastern Ukraine if Patrick Lancaster wasn't there the last 9 years recording it? You'd get nothing. And
Exactly.
that's why it's crucial for these people that are sharing the screen, for many other people outside of the screen, is to get our message through. And AJ, I think your pursuit to collaborate with many YouTubers, you're on the right mission. You have an amazing subscriber base as well. And let's really get into it tonight here. I know Brian knows a lot of stuff. And Brian, can you give us the latest on what you feel is going on? Western media is saying Russia is about to get, pushed back. They're giving up ground. Every time I listen to you, I know it's well researched and it's educational. Let's hear it.
Before we make a start, Brian, I just wanted to thank all the moderators out there, and we have about 600 people viewing in. So if you can kindly make sure you like, make sure you share, subscribe, would be very much appreciated. So over to you, Brian. And also, for those of you who do not know me, who do not follow my channel, one of the reasons my face is not on there, because I actually work for the government. I am part of the civil service, and like Brian said, we all have stories, and unfortunately, I am still working for the government. And those of you who think, oh, he's not brave, well, you've got to look at somebody like Graham Phillips. If you do not know if you do not know who Graham Phillips is, you're welcome to Google him. He's a British citizen. He got sanctioned. He lost his home. He lost his bank account. He's got absolutely nothing at the moment. And that's why a lot of people that live in UK who all work in the government have to be extra careful, extra vigilant. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. It is a big risk some of us are taking, going onto YouTube and speaking our minds. So I hope you guys can appreciate that. I'm happy to show my face if I ever leave my job or if I get sacked. But until then, not quite. So over to you, Brian.
Sure.
Happy for you to carry
I
on.
just want to add onto that. When I left the Marine Corps, it was not easy, and it was extremely dangerous. And I was in the brig for a while, but that I was a young guy, and I you could even say that I was stupid and careless, and I wasn't really thinking things through. It was kind of a rash decision. And I know many really good guys in the Marine Corps. They were older, and they agreed with me when I was telling them that why I was doing what I was doing. They agreed with me 100%, but their whole life was tied to that, and they were at a period of time where it wasn't that easy to just stop and restart their lives again. So, like you said, there's a story behind everybody, especially when you get involved in this. It is dangerous, and I don't blame people for not getting involved, not doing more, because it is dangerous. I'm on some Ukrainian government list, so yeah, I totally understand that, and people need to keep all of that in mind. And there's a role for everyone to play, big or small. So I mean, people just out there sharing this with other people, that is a small thing, but it is an important thing.
Yeah, Brian, I'm on an NGO list as well, and even though my channel is not even big, I'm still on there, and it just shows their desperation. Even they're attacking small channels like myself.
Well, so that's a good. Oh, sorry, Alex, go ahead.
That's okay. Just to add to that, I've probably got about 5,000 people that would like to meet me at the Canadian border if I fly into Canada. So I hear you guys. It's extremely, and we chuckle about this, but I'm quite serious about these situations. I know that I've had a lot of conversations with Patrick Lancaster, and he's pretty balanced in what he says. He says, go check out both sides, come up with your conclusions, make your own judgments. But it's guys like Brian, guys like AJ, myself, that we're here for a reason. I've never imagined actually having a channel on YouTube, especially in China. But I purposely have dedicated the next 2 or 3 years of my life to be here in China to tell the story. When you get to that point where, the guys that I'm sharing this screen with, you guys, Brian, AJ, you know what I'm talking about, right? I don't know when that moment was with you, Brian. Maybe you can share us when that moment was for you and you said, wait a minute, I have to do something about this. When would that been?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've told this story many times, but I will say again, I was in the Marine Corps. I signed up because I really believed I was doing something to defend my country. I had some very convoluted ideas in my head as to why we were all over the world. I had family members that tried to stop me from joining. But when I was in, because I really honestly wanted to do the right thing, I couldn't bring myself to lie to myself or others about what I was seeing for real versus what I thought I was seeing. I think being in Japan and just seeing people there who didn't want us there, and the way U.S. Marines treated the locals, that disgusted me. That made me feel ashamed. When we deployed to Thailand, it was the exact same thing. There were things that we did there in training, artillery training. We were firing 90-pound artillery rounds over people's houses. That would never be allowed in Japan or the United States. And the officers were all aware of the danger. They just didn't care because that is the attitude. And I remember this incident. We were at the base of Mount Fuji doing live fire exercises with artillery, and the officer had his watch, and the Japanese government said, "Can you stop at this time because of the school schedule down in the town below?" And so he watched his wristwatch, made sure we went over 5 minutes deliberately, kind of to say, hey, we're in charge here. Even though it's your country, we're in charge here. We'll go over 5 minutes. One of those power move things that we see people do. So all of it added up. I can't say there was one specific moment, but it all added up to a single moment where I was sitting on stairs actually thinking, like, what am I doing here? And then I made the decision to get out. And I didn't know what I was going to do, but I mean, that was the start. But AJ, you said people are desperate. The West is desperate. They put you on a list, even though you see yourself as a minor figure. I would say that I'm a pretty minor figure, and I think desperation. If we're going to talk about the situation in Ukraine, Western desperation is what we see coming into focus. We're hearing about the dirty bomb. This is Russia putting out this warning that they claim to have information about a potential dirty bomb, which to my understanding is just a regular bomb mixed with radioactive material, so that when it goes off, it disperses radioactive material. Now, Russia has done this before in Syria, and they were telling the truth, because after that, the US-backed militants operating in Syria did actually carry out a number of false flag attacks, claiming that the Syrian government was gassing its own people. And it turned out it was actually the US-backed militants doing that. And the Russian government would try to get ahead of these incidents by warning everyone that another one is coming. And eventually we saw these false flag operations stop. Maybe not because of that, maybe just because the whole conflict was winding down. But now we see the same thing happening here in Ukraine. And there's much more at stake, because I don't think anyone has ever detonated a dirty bomb before. So this would be unprecedented. But the desperation in Kiev, Washington, London, Brussels, that the desperation is unprecedented. So we have to wait and see what actually ends up happening.
Sure. So I think all the viewers will want to know, how the hell did Ukraine get hold of a dirty bomb? I mean, technically, we all know that Ukraine has had nukes before from the Soviet era, but we believe that they were given back to Russia, or Russia took them back as part of the peace agreements. I'm not sure, but they do have 3 or 4 nuclear power plants in Ukraine. So do you think they've been building up these dirty bombs in secret, or how do you think they've managed to get hold of it?
I will admit that I'm not an expert in this subject, so this is just speculation. And if anyone is an expert, correct me if I'm wrong. But all you would need is to find some radioactive waste that you could just include into a conventional bomb. You could make it a small bomb, a gigantic bomb. It's really very easy to customize this sort of thing. But the problem is, radioactive material is tracked, I think, very closely, and Ukraine would have to figure out a way to get a hold of this and do it in a way that wouldn't make it abundantly obvious that Ukraine did this. So maybe they would get material from a power plant that Russia had been at and then withdrew from, maybe Chernobyl, because in the beginning of the conflict, Russian forces were there, and now they're not there. So I don't think there's any way that Ukraine could do this, and it would, to anyone using critical thinking, would say, yeah, Russia did that. There's no reason for Russia to use a dirty bomb. They have regular nuclear bombs. Why would they need a dirty bomb? A dirty bomb is beneath the conventional weapons that they have. They have plenty of conventional weapons that could do much more damage. Look at Ukraine's power grid, for example. They don't need to use a dirty bomb. Ukraine does, as a pretext for the West to get involved. This is the thinking going on in someone's head, if this is what they're actually doing.
Okay, so let me give you a scenario. We've all seen how that truck bomb blew up in the Crimean Bridge. And obviously, it went through the checkpoints, no issues, and it blew up in the middle of the bridge. So imagine this scenario. Somehow, Ukraine managed to put a dirty bomb in a truck, drives all the way into Russia, blows it up in Moscow. Can you imagine the casualties that would cause? And what do you think Russia would do in return? They would obviously fire nukes in return, wouldn't you think? What's your opinion?
I think Russia would only use nuclear weapons as an absolute last resort. Even a dirty bomb, as egregious as that would be, I don't think that they would use nuclear weapons in retaliation, but you would certainly have opened the door a little bit of a way for them to eventually work their way toward that direction. But I think the retaliation would be massive. Whatever that you think they're doing to the electric grid right now and to decision-making centers now and other types of infrastructure now, it would be multiplied. And I remember all of these months, people said, special military operation, that's just a euphemism for all-out war. And when you read the Western media, they go out of their way to say all-out invasion. But it is not an all-out invasion. It really is a special military operation. And if there's one thing that this bombing and drone and missile strike campaign on the electric grid proves, is that Russia has many opportunities, a lot of latitude to expand this as much as they want. And so if they do a dirty bomb in Moscow, first of all, it'll be obvious that it was Ukraine who did it.
Yeah.
Like I'm thinking that if they were going to do a dirty bomb, it would be somewhere in Ukraine so that they could claim Russia did it, so that they could give the West a justification to get involved directly in the conflict, which is something I can't count it out, but I really don't think the West would want to. The whole point of a proxy war is to get other people killed with other people's money, not to get involved in it yourself. So,
Alex, your thoughts?
Well, I think Brian will agree with me here when it comes to nuclear warheads. I mean, visiting Japan in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, even as a tourist to those areas, you can see the carnage that those weapons left behind. I'm not sure the world has an appetite to ever repeat or see something like that ever again. It's pretty catastrophic. I know visiting those sites a few years ago has always, left a thought in my mind that first, how did that ever happen to begin with? The world, I thought at that time, must have gone real mad. I don't think we're there yet. There's talks, there's people, puffing up their chest saying, well, we got these, but you have a country that can defend itself. Russia can defend itself. And I think the Americans, as much as they want to show superiority against the Russian military, has enough common sense that if they let one of those rip in the air, there's a pretty good chance that it's going to be all out, and then it'll be over for everyone. So I don't think we're going to get there. I don't want to go there either. But yeah, that site in Japan, I'm sure, Brian, you visited it a few times down there. That is absolutely mind-blowing.
So let me give you this possible scenario. Do you think the West is helping Ukraine build this dirty bomb? I mean, we all know that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline would not have been blown up by Ukraine by itself. They would have had a lot of help. They would have probably US did it mostly, and even though they don't like to admit it, everyone in the world knows it, they did it. Do you think that the West will help them build a nuclear bomb? And do you think that might be a pretense for a nuclear escalation, Brian?
I think there's two possibilities. I think there's a possibility that Ukraine is doing this unilaterally. The problem the United States constantly has is that the people they approach in any targeted country and sponsor and build up, these are the absolute worst in any given society. These are people who could not get into power on their own merit because they have no merit. They're just vicious, ruthless, and fanatical. And this is why the US picks them, because they are fanatics. They don't think before they do anything. And you see Ukraine in the situation that it's in now, and some of the things that they do that I'm sure people in Washington, London, Brussels are face palming very often, because these are things that are counterproductive and making it that much harder. The videos of them torturing and killing prisoners of war. I mean, why would you do that? And they did it repeatedly, to the point where even the New York Times had to cover it. So this is a possibility that they might be doing something this ill-advised, this irreversible, this and poorly conceived, because it is not going to do what they think it's going to do. It is not. It's going to blow back in their face, maybe even literally. If if the West was helping them, there's a possibility that the West is engineering some sort of false flag because they want to get involved directly. I don't think that it's a high probability, but there is always that possibility. We would never know. I mean, there's a lot of things like NordStream, the NordStream pipelines blowing up. We're never going to know for sure unless someone comes out and admits something, or we get very lucky and that information is made available. But other than that, we'll just have to guess it perpetually because we will never know. So I think there's two possibilities. That I think the one that is most probable is Ukraine just doing it on their own because they are detached from reality. They are desperate, and they can. And so it's the only thing they can do.
And you're right. I mean, thinking about what Ukraine has done in the past. They were shelling the Zaporizhia nuclear power plants. Obviously, they was trying to somehow escalate things there. Because if one of those shells had hit that power plant, then it would have caused a huge catastrophe. We're talking about Chernobyl levels. So that has failed now. And obviously, the next step is to build a dirty bomb and release that. So it does sound like, the evidence points to Ukraine somehow doing that. And plus, Zelensky came on the other day talking about preemptive strike against Russia, a nuclear preemptive strike. And even though the West is not going to do it, he might do it. He might say, "Oh, we had to do this." What are your thoughts, Alex? What would you think? And then we go to Brian.
I think there's two things that we still are missing here. First, before Ukraine got into this conflict, this country's infrastructure wasn't great to begin with. And you're trying to now build up this military, as Brian said, over the last few months, they can only do so much. If you're going to have anti-aircraft set up, that's going to take months, years possibly, to get that in order. Another thing that I think people are missing here is the Ukraine government, they're bad actors. Let's look back at Maidan in 2014. There was a phone call with Victoria Nuland that admitted that, wait a moment, this sniper shots actually weren't coming from the police on the people. They were actually going the wrong way. And they can't get the clown show in order there. That's the unfortunate thing. And the sad part is, it's sad for the people of Ukraine because they're caught in this. And, all countries that are involved in this should take a step back and see really what's going on here. And how this all started, in 2014, the conflict. I think a lot of the viewers were not aware that, Yanukovych was actually the governor of the Donbass area. And you want to be proud of a guy that is a president in that region. And then overnight, he's basically had to flee the country. And ever since that night happened, this country has never got back in order. They try to do a lot of online stuff. I mean, this you got to remember, this is a pretty lawless country before all of this started, and there's no change in that. Some of these weapons, as Brian has indicated before, never make it into Ukraine. They are for sale. You've got countries that border. I'm going to make a kind of like a prediction here, and maybe Brian will back me up on this. Transnistria is a breakaway country. Well, it is an independent country, depends who you ask, but it's sandwiched right between Moldova and the Ukraine. I guarantee you that some of these weapons are probably sitting in the territory of Transnistria. This is pretty much a borderless country that does support Russia, wants to be part of Russia. But there is a massive arms trade going on there. And it wouldn't take much to take a few packages that were in Poland, intended to go into the Ukraine, slip them across the Dniester River, and then they're into Europe. And this, I think, Brian, a lot of this artillery that is used may end up on the streets in Europe in the next few years. Thoughts on that?
Yep.
Yeah,
Brian?
well, look at the situation in Libya, how we were all lied into that conflict, how the truth was revealed that we're not helping pro-democracy freedom fighters, we're helping literally Libya's Al-Qaeda franchise. And then the collapse of Libya, the torrent of refugees fleeing. And then also because Libya was a destination for refugees from across Africa fleeing other proxy conflicts the West was sponsoring, they just continued on their way through Libya into Europe. And so that created a huge problem for Europe. And this was something that even Muammar Gaddafi predicted before that even happened. So this in Ukraine obviously is going to have ramifications down the road. Some are predictable, some will be unpredictable. These weapons floating around, yes, obviously the huge amounts of fanatics that the West has deliberately encouraged the creation of from 2014 onward, that is going to have a lasting impact on the European continent. This is, and just think about all of these fanatics once the conflict is over, and if they have to leave Ukraine, where are they going to go? What are they going to do? They're going to do something similar to what Al-Qaeda did, and the U.S. will probably continue using them and encouraging their activities around the world. So especially all throughout Europe. I don't know if people remember, this is a Cold War type of thing, the Operation Gladio, and the U.S. was using far-right extremists, Nazis essentially, literal Nazis from World War II. They were using them, creating networks across Europe to stage attacks, to target certain governments, to coerce different members of the European community. So something like that very easily can unfold in the wake of this. So it is over. It's not actually ever really over.
You made some great points, Brian. Let me put some scary scenarios in front of both of you, and I want you both to kind of answer the best you can. Imagine this dirty bomb goes off in Ukraine, and we all know that the weapons in Ukraine are in the black market, in the, you know, they're selling for whoever wants to buy them. So imagine if a dirty bomb goes off somewhere and the war on terror is still not over. You know, there's still terrorists all, you know, looming all over the world. They're in Syria, they're in Iraq, they're in Afghanistan. Imagine if somebody with some money goes to Ukraine and say, you know, we like what you did with the dirty bomb. Can we have one, please? We'll give you this much money. What's to say they're not going to give it? Of course they're going to give it, right? I mean, imagine how much more dangerous the world will be if this dirty bomb goes off and people with money get that kind of technology, take it to the West, blow it up in the middle of Germany or maybe UK or even United States. Can you imagine how scary things are going to be? What are your thoughts, guys?
Well, look at all the criminal factions that Ukraine is attracting to the fighting itself. These are groups from outside the country. They have their own networks, extremist networks. And so, yes, that is very scary if they see this process of putting together one of these dirty bombs and they're able to get their hands on radioactive material. It's very dangerous. And this is what the U.S. does all the time. They destabilize these countries with reckless abandon. They don't think, or they do think, and they just don't care about all of the ramifications this is going to have down the road, how dangerous it is. Because again, for the special interests running the United States or the European Union or the UK, these are people who are not paying for this with their own money. It's taxpayer money, and it's not them bleeding. It's not them facing the risk of death, fighting and the ramifications, the fallout of all of this. It's other people, and so there really is no motivation for them to stop doing it. So again, this is the latest chapter.
What about you, Alex? You mentioned something about you wanted to talk about Lithuania as well.
Sure, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But these guns, this ammunition, these life-killing weapons are already on the streets. And they're already sitting in warehouses, probably in the outskirts of many major European cities already. They probably were sold. I'm not even going to say probably. A lot of them were sold either in Poland when they were dropped off there. I mean, Brian, you know how easy it would be to, container lost here, half a 20-foot container lost there, a couple of pallets here, a couple of pallets there. Got to remember that Ukraine was a pretty desperate country before all this happened. It was already pillaged throughout the years. Lawless? Absolutely. And that's not to say that it couldn't have gone on the right track moving forward. But you just got to go back and look at the history and how this all started. And even from 2014 forward, there were so many organizations being formed, whether they were far right, whether they were, Azov. I mean, these guys knew that this military hardware was coming. I'll give you an example, AJ. Let's say you're a soldier in the Ukrainian army and you make $300 a month to fight for your country. And all of a sudden, there's a few pallets of ammunition there that you could sell a couple of those and probably live very comfortable for the next 10 or 15 years. You can't tell me that 1 or 2 or maybe 20 or 100 of those have not gone missing. They're definitely gone. They're definitely into the black market. They're sitting and this isn't Hollywood, guys. I'm not talking Hollywood here. These pallets are sitting in a major European cities all over Europe. When will we see them get to the streets? Probably when all this is over and everyone's forgot about it. And as Brian said, there's a lot of criminal organizations out there that are already set up for this kind of hardware. They know how to move this stuff. They know how to get it through those networks. I think you know how this works, right, Brian, with this type of hardware? I mean, who would be the first organization that would say, we'll take everything?
The first and foremost criminal organization on planet Earth is probably the CIA. And we know that all of those weapons going to the terrorists, literally Al-Qaeda and ISIS in Syria, these were weapons being brought in by the plane load by the United States from Eastern European countries. It's exactly as you say, Alex. These are people who had all of these weapons and pallets and containers, and the CIA just bought them up and sent them to terrorists in Syria. So where might we most likely see these weapons turn up? Most likely in some CIA-sponsored destabilization operation. There's weapons in, like, again, 2010 here in Bangkok. I mean, that's what got me involved. The U.S.-backed opposition had war weapons in the streets, and I'm not saying that they came from Eastern Europe necessarily, but guns don't grow on trees. They have to come from somewhere. And so this is where they come from. That they create this type of instability for their own ends, but there's alternative opportunities here that are available to them, and they will take full advantage of that. So these weapons floating around now, they'll be the color revolution tomorrow.
I'm going to add to that point, Brian. There was a fellow that told me on a live stream that I did about a month ago. He says, the Americans can eventually get hardware into the Ukraine. A lot of it will be picked up by aerial or by drones and destroyed. But he says it's the true criminals that can really get hardware into countries through their network undetected. And that right there said to me, whoa, okay, these guys are probably sitting there at the port of entries, Poland. That might be one of the major distribution points, knowing that there's millions of dollars sitting in hangars, millions of dollars sitting in bonded warehouses. It doesn't take long to figure that out. 1 or 2 go missing, 3 or 4 go missing. No big deal, but we'll see how this plays out. And I hope that the hardware that's being shipped over to that country slows down. I'm not saying that a country shouldn't defend itself, but we all know what's going on here with the military-industrial complex. It's very clear. If you want me to make that point on Lithuania, I can get it out of the way, or do you want me to wait for later, AJ?
Yeah, let's wait for later.
Sure.
We've got 1,332 people here today, so I really appreciate you guys listening to us. Don't forget, it's very important to like, share where you can. It's important to spread this out to as many people as possible. So we appreciate your help. So Brian, let's talk about Ukraine a bit more. We all know these Iranian drones have been causing havoc all over Ukraine. There's no answers that the Ukrainian air defense can do. And you've seen images of police officers and soldiers trying to shoot it down with their machine guns. And we all know Kiev's surrounded by NATO-based anti-aircraft missiles, and they've been absolutely hopeless. So I want to talk a bit further about this. First of all, there's speculation whether they are Iranian drones or not. But if they are, isn't this gonna scare the West even more? Because everyone's been told that Iranians can't do anything. They've been sanctioned for years, and suddenly they're coming out with these amazing drones which are bypassing air defenses, causing major havoc all over Ukraine. And the West is absolutely freaking out, and Americans are freaking out. The Israelis are freaking out, thinking, well, how the hell did Iran get this kind of technology? What's your thoughts about that?
Oh, there's a lot to get into there. First of all, I don't know if people know this, but Iran even has its own space program. They can launch satellites into space, not nowhere on the level of, say, the US, China, or Russia, but they can. And it goes to show you what they're able to achieve even under these crippling decades-long sanctions. Now, Russia insists that these are not drones that they bought from Iran, but they do have a striking resemblance to drones that Iran operates. But maybe Russia is just making them under license in Russia. Is a good possibility of that. I think the problem with Ukraine's air defense systems is their air defense systems at the beginning of this conflict, the end of February, they're Soviet-based. Things like S-300, different systems like this, they're excellent. The Soviet Union and now Russia make the best air defense systems in the world. The problem is Ukraine has a finite supply of them. If they get blown up, and people have probably seen videos of Russia destroying 3, 4, 5 of these launchers all at one time. They're all concentrated in the same area, and Russia just blows them all up at the same time. They expend interceptors, these missiles that they use to down aircraft, cruise missiles, and drones. There's a finite supply of them. This conflict has been intense and ongoing for months, over half a year now. They're going to be running out of these things. They don't have factories where they can build this. Again, Russia has destroyed Ukraine's military-industrial capacity. And even Western analysts admit that the West has not really invested heavily in air defense in the sense of ground-based surface-to-air missiles. They focus more on air superiority with fighters, interceptors, warplanes, essentially. And so that this has been and will be a weak point for the West. So whatever systems they're going to send Ukraine, they are going to be inferior to the Soviet-era systems Ukraine had. And to compound that problem is the fact that the West does not have a lot of anti-air defense systems to send Ukraine. They said one IRIS-T system, one system does not make an air defense network. It's just one launcher and maybe a separate radar set, and that's it. Very limited in what it can do. They're going to send another 3 over the course of next year at earliest. So you can see there's a numbers problem here. And by the time all 4 are in Ukraine, there is no guarantee that the first 1 or 2 or 3 weren't found and destroyed, just as Russia has been destroying all of Ukraine's other air defense systems. So this is going to be a constant problem. The drones, they fly low. They're smaller than a warplane. These are things that would be hard for most air defense systems to see and target in the conventional way. So it could be a combination of Ukraine is just running out of launchers, running out of missiles, or they're just not capable of hitting this type of target, all contributing to the fact that they've got these drones wiping out their essential infrastructure. I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, it does. Would you say that this is like would you say the US military is like a sports game where offense is the best defense, which means US is focusing on having their air power, military might, rather than focusing on defense? And is this why Russia has better air defense system than the United States does?
I think that's a fair way of saying it. I mean, to just think about all of U.S. wars of aggression, they have a small necessity to be able to have air defense, but usually how do they knock out enemy aircraft? With their own aircraft, usually before the enemy aircraft get off the ground. But if they do get off the ground, U.S. warplanes will take them out. It's usually not ground-based air defense systems that do that. So they have focused a lot on building up a massive fleet of warplanes to do this rather than ground-based launchers. And because they are always on the offensive.
Yeah, and there's examples of this in Saudi Arabia where Patriots have been absolutely useless against Houthi missiles and drones. It's come to a point now where United States has taken away these patrons because they have been absolutely useless, and and I think it's much easier to take them away than to keep them there and showing they're ineffective. What do you think? I mean, these Patriot systems, they really haven't been tested, have they?
Yes, and this is not AJ saying this because he's a Putin propagandist. This is actually Western analysts. This is consensus among Western analysts that the Patriot does not live up to expectations, that it has not performed well during any conflict. And Saudi Arabia and its war on Yemen, this is just the latest example. And yeah, a lot was getting through. Ballistic missiles, drones, they were getting through these air defenses. The missiles were firing and missing targets and then just falling onto the ground. And they were running out of missiles. There was a crisis where Saudi Arabia was out of interceptors. They asked the United States for more. The United States is not capable of making more fast enough. And so they told other nations in the Persian Gulf to go through their inventory and see what they could spare for Saudi Arabia. It's a very sad state of affairs. But it's also the true face of U.S. military power. They spend a lot of money, there's no doubt, but it's not going to actual capabilities. It's going into the coffers of these corporations.
Brian, I got to ask you this. I mean, before Ukraine, before there was China, there's also before there was the war on terror. We've been hearing for 20, 30 years that Israel is going to attack Iran, or the West is going to attack Iran, because for them, Iran has been under heavy sanctions, and they're always talking about it. I mean, you see papers and you see past presidents who have mentioned it as well. Is this off the table now? Is Iran become too powerful for that to happen now? I mean, looking at these drones and seeing how Iran has technologically advanced, is it too late? Is Iran too powerful now for Israel to attack? I mean, you've seen Israel attacking the Iraqi nuclear power plant back in the day, 1980s, yes. The Bush Air, I believe. And do you think Iran is still a target? And do you think Iran is going to be a target now that the West thinks that Iran is arming Russia? And do you think Iran might be a target because of that?
I mean, that's a good point. And the way you put it is important for people to understand. The West is not having a change in policy. There's a change in reality that their policy simply can do nothing with. So yes, Iran is more and more capable militarily. They have been escaping these sanctions. They are building alliances and friendships and economic relationships with nations around the globe. You can see this alternative system, or multipolarism, if you want to call it, coming into focus. And the U.S. and by proxy through Israel, they have always wanted to attack Iran, but it's not practical. And each year that goes by, just as you're saying, it becomes harder and harder because Iran is building up its capabilities. And so a conventional military strike on Iran, I can't say that it's ruled out. They might decide to throw everything they've got all at one go, hoping to get lucky or something. You can never rule it out. But Iran has always been under attack, just not in the conventional way. They have these mobs. They have terrorists that the U.S. admits that they wanted to sponsor, that they took off terrorist lists so that they could sponsor, attacking them economically, just in every way imaginable. These proxy wars, the U.S. is waging a proxy war on Syria. This is one of Iran's closest allies. So they have been attacking Iran, just not directly. And I imagine that will continue for as long as they can. But just as you say, things are changing and it's just not practical anymore.
Before I move to you, Alex, I just want to also say I watched Top Gun 2 the other day, and it made over $1 billion. And there is a country which they are bombing, and suspiciously it looked like Iran. So, and they're blowing up this nuclear facility in a Middle Eastern country. Obviously, they didn't name Iran, but I think everyone knew it was Iran. Do you think they're getting the American public used to the idea of doing that? I mean, or do they have other issues happening around the world, like in Ukraine, like in China, for example?
Oh, is this for me? Yeah, no, this is something that has been a constant process. Yes, getting the American people okay with the idea that Russians, Iranians, the Chinese, they're all subhuman. They're barbarians. They're a constant danger. They're not like us. It's okay for us to do this to them. And if it were to ever come down to it, you should support a war against these countries. And yes, Hollywood obviously plays a huge role in advancing that agenda, the propaganda. I mean, you look everywhere. You can't just go watch them. If you're a geopolitical analyst, you can't watch a movie to switch off because it's saturated. Netflix, Hollywood movies, TV series, it's saturated with this propaganda. You're absolutely right. That's what they're trying to do. They've been doing it for decades too, by the way.
Over to you, Alex. Any thoughts?
I'm going to echo Brian's word there. Actually, Top Gun, you could see that it was delayed a couple of times. And we all know it's easy to research on this, as I do try to research in depth a lot of things that I talk about. This one in particular, this movie, there was involvement from the Pentagon with this movie. Also in the last Top Gun, it was used as a recruitment tool for the United States Navy. My father actually served in the Canadian Navy and my grandfather in the Second World War in the Canadian Navy. These are propaganda machines. That Top Gun movie, clear propaganda. The bizarre thing about it is it did over $1 billion in sales for the movie. So thank you to the viewers for supporting one of the biggest propaganda movies of the year. You've paid for it, not only for the actors, but you've probably got the US government's money back that they had to put into that movie. So nice job on that one. Moving forward on that, you have to understand that each country has to sell it to its people. Let's go back. And there's a country that I was really researching back in the late 1980s and then into the 90s. My father told me that about 2 weeks before the Yugoslavian war happened, that America was going in there. And I said, Dad, this doesn't make any sense. And he says, listen, you have to understand when the drums are beating, America will streamline, go into it. And this was around the time where Bill Clinton was about to be impeached. The dress that revealed the samples, he knew he was done. And quickly, with Madeleine Albright and the crew, managed to march NATO. That was the first NATO invasion. That lasted 78 days. Quote unquote, more bombs were dropped in Yugoslavia in 78 days, I believe, in both Iraq wars. Maybe we can get some clarification on that, but that was the last research paper that I read. Canadian fighter jets, I don't know if your audience knows that, I'm Canadian, but Canadian fighter jets were responsible for over 50% of the air sorties that were blowing up the infrastructure. This is out of the playbook of the NATO handbook used and I think printed on how to go in and wipe out a country or how to defend a country that is about to get wiped out. That use of a dirty bomb, it's in the playbook. You bet you it's in the playbook. They needed a reason to go into Yugoslavia. They found one. It's pretty interesting. Now, if the tables were turned, they are normally bombing countries if another country feels that it's dealing with Islamic fundamentalists. Bizarre as we move forward to see that. But one just has to go back and really dissect what happened in Yugoslavia. And after traveling to every one of the countries after that, to Bosnia-Herzegovina, to see all these towns, Serbia, Croatia, you can see that the scars have been left there. There was no rebuilding after that because the NATO team didn't want that country or its other countries to rebuild. Now, here's where I'm going to enter what I was talking about, the Lithuania. I know that a lot of people probably haven't heard of this little country. It's a Baltic country. It's part of Eastern Europe. It borders Latvia, Belarus. It's strategic. And there's a sliver of property on one of its coasts, and that is part of Russia. And Brian, I'm sure you can explain that to the audience later, the significance of that property there, Kaliningrad, that is Russian property with access to the Baltic Sea. That's right. So in 2002, and I'm just going to give you guys something to think about here for a moment. 2002, Lithuania would do anything to be part of the European Union. Now, what the European Union wanted it to do is forget about its past. Okay, Lithuania, you're part of the future. We want you to kind of forget about your past. And while you're at it, Lithuania, we want you to give up 2 of your nuclear power plants. In 2002, they started the promise to decommission these power plants. You can look it up. It's all details, all factual information on the internet. These 2 plants were decommissioned. They supplied almost 70% of the electricity grid for Lithuania. So that was part of the deal. Give up your electricity grid, become, reliable on the rest of Europe, and we'll give you access to the European Union. They took the deal. But what wasn't reported in the media is after they decommissioned these nuclear power generators, they turned them into, get this, nuclear deposit facilities where other European Union countries like France and Germany could deposit nuclear waste. Isn't that a great deal that you ask a small Eastern European country that so desperately wanted to get into the European Union at that time to give up 70% of their power grid? Fast forward today, 2022, where Germany is reopening some of their nuclear facilities. And what do you get in return? You get to be a nice storage facility for all that nuclear waste in Europe. And this really showed me that there is much more going on behind the scenes here than we are given by our media. And it's guys like Brian and, AJ as well, and myself that, this kind of stuff, when you read it, at first you think it's impossible for this to happen. But more of these doors are opening that is revealing the real nasty stuff that's going on behind here. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy at all, but every day now that where I'm digging deeper into these stories, digging deeper into what really happened in these nations, I just wonder, this is for Brian and AJ, how long have we been lied for? How many generations are we being lied for? That is the question that I would like to know. When did this start? Gentlemen.
I think we've always been lied to, Alex. I mean, ever since I can remember. I mean, you're talking about the Vietnam War, the Korean War, every single war that has been involved, we've been involved with. It's all lies. I remember the times when United States said that we need to go into Vietnam because if we don't, communism will rule the world, and communism will take over the world, and blah blah blah. All these ridiculous lies, and guess what? When America pulled out, did communism rule the world? Did they move on to the into the United States soil? It didn't. So, you go back in history, Iraq War, and I think even way before our times, it's all been lies. I think I woke up in the Iraq War, especially the second one, and I can understand the first one where they had to go in and liberate Kuwait and stuff like that. And I was quite young then. I think I was about 8-9 years old. So I believed in it. And then the second Iraq War, I just couldn't understand why they want to go back in there. And all these ridiculous stories about, weapons of mass destruction, and you had that Kuwaiti girl who completely lied on oath and said that there were babies being taken out of incubators. Nobody actually questioned her. Nobody checked who she was. She was the ambassador's daughter, and it's just lies after lies. Then you have Colin Powell. And Colin Powell was, at the time, he was called the white dove of the administration. And I remember, Bush was so stupid in many ways. He couldn't even put two sentences together. But then you had Colin Powell, and everybody knew Colin Powell was respected. They called him the white dove, and they used him. They used him to lie in front of the United Nations with this vial of washing powder, saying this could destroy the world. Oh my God, and completely ruined his reputation. Go on, guys.
Before I forget, Brian, Kaliningrad. Do you have much thoughts on that?
But it's out there. It's not directly connected to the rest of Russian territory. So this is a vulnerability that NATO is always going to try to exploit.
It's sitting right there in the Baltic Sea, ready to go, isn't it? I mean, isn't that something that could really play a strategic part in the next few months? Or that's just I see it sitting there. I don't know if a lot of the people watching this program, maybe AJ or somebody, can bring up a map, but I found it really remarkable. If people are wondering why I'm talking about Lithuania, my wife's Lithuanian, so I've been down to that part in Lithuania, and wow, I mean, you just drive down the road, and all of a sudden you see the Russian border patrols there, the flags waving. This is territory of Russia. I mean, there's an interesting comment by Rolf there. Kaliningrad is a fortress, massive defenses. I mean, thoughts on that, Brian? I mean, could something like that be important? If there's some issues with Belarus as well, there's a buildup of soldiers. You know what we're talking about here, and this is the kind of stuff that I was really excited to get you on the show to pick your brain about this kind of stuff. I mean, Russians are adding 9,000 troops to Belarus. That was my last understanding. But Kaliningrad, they must have something going on there.
Well, with Kaliningrad, I don't know if people remember, but earlier on, I forget which one of those countries, maybe Lithuania, did it, but they cut overland. Certain goods were not allowed to pass through.
Lithuania, and my wife and I don't condone what the behavior of the Lithuanian government's doing. That is for certain, guys. So don't. Go ahead, Brian. Sorry.
But that was kind of a very heightened time of tensions between Russia and the West, and it seemed like they kind of backed down on that. Not Russia, the West kind of backed down on that. They were saying, well, no, that government was just doing that on their own. We didn't tell them to do that. The EU was saying that. So it's a difficult topic, but there's no disputing that Kaliningrad is Russian, and I think going after Kaliningrad would be the same as just going after universally recognized Russian territory. It would be a huge mistake, and you would be handing the Russian government, a blank check. Essentially, everyone in Russia would unite around that, and I think NATO is thinking about these things, not because we've pushed these buttons before in history. You don't want to do that with Russia. So. I would imagine that they have built significant defenses there. They have all kinds of plans and contingencies. This is something they've been thinking about long before this began in late February. Something else you said, Alex, was about how they never rebuilt Yugoslavia. And they haven't rebuilt any of the places they've destroyed. Look at Afghanistan. They put trillions of dollars into Afghanistan. They didn't rebuild anything. It was a huge con. That's all it was. And for people now who claim that they support Ukraine, watching the country get dismembered because of this conflict and cheering it on, encouraging them to fight on, the United States is not going to rebuild Ukraine. They haven't rebuilt anything anywhere that they've ruined, whether it was them invading or it's some proxy conflict that they were behind. They're not even rebuilding basic infrastructure in the United States. The country is rotting out from under the American people. So they're not going to rebuild Ukraine. That's very important for people to understand. And prospective clients of the United States in the future, say the administration in Taipei, think very carefully before you do business with the United States, because they will break it and they will not buy it. They will leave it broken, and that'll be something you have to live with indefinitely. So it's very important for people to keep that in mind.
I remember when Lithuania did block Russian access to Kaliningrad, and I actually thought Russia would make a land bridge from Belarus going all the way to Kaliningrad. And it's their right to do so, because if you block access to their own land, they have every means possible to make sure they have access to it. And there is no way NATO would have got involved, because this is something Lithuania had instigated themselves. Don't you think, Brian and Alex?
Hard to say, because if it was something Lithuania was put up to, of course NATO was planning on the legal, political, and media plan to get behind that and use that as a pretext. So we always have to be careful, because we've seen what the West has done. We've seen what they've been doing in Syria, before that Iraq, Libya. So the sky is the limit.
And you've got to also understand the little bit of the history, not too far back, but let's go back to the millennium there with Lithuania, a country that was getting on its feet. Things were moving forward. Bush just rolled through town making promises that if anyone ever touched Lithuania, America would be there. Great propaganda. It's true. He stood in the city center there in Pilis Gatvi. That's the main city center there in Vilnius, Lithuania. And he made a promise. Now, this is a NATO country, but it thinks short term. It's had a drastic decline in its economy, even before the pandemic was ripping through there. It's a country that, in some sense, is rather confused. It's lost a quarter of its population since becoming a member of the European Union. Some of them went to the United Kingdom. Some of them went to, I think even Ireland, and many other choices, because they had 26 or 27 other countries to choose from with the freedom of movement of people. But here's where they run into a problem. Their government is not governing the country with common sense. When you pick a fight with China and you hurt your local businesses like it did nonstop overnight, when they decided that, maybe we should be interested in recognizing, an office in the capital city. Well, that was the biggest mistake that they could have ever done, identifying and accepting Taiwan to have an office representation in Vilnius. Well, overnight, they learned a very, very valuable lesson that no, you have to honor the United Nations. I think it's Resolution 2758, that there is only one China. But they didn't, and they still are sticking to their guns on this one, as their exporters, who love to export items to China, get obliterated. And as well, they find that their import or customs codes have been pretty much erased from the system. So when you are putting your economy at risk, you're putting your local businesses against the wall, and now you're taking a stance on trying to act like an intermediary between Kaliningrad and its sovereign territory. You're going to get blasted. And financially, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm pretty certain that the same thing that's happened to a majority of the European Union countries, the Zelensky curse, is coming to Lithuania. I can just imagine that in a short time, that government is also going to be replaced or voted out. That's my opinion.
Yeah, just to carry on from what you said, Alex, those of you who don't know, Lithuania used to be part of the 17+1 international group, where there was a direct link coming from China going all the way to the Baltic states via BRI, train links. And Lithuania decided to step out of that and cut all links with China. And they decided to add Lithuanian embassy in Taiwan and vice versa. But if you look at it in a business sense, there is no way any Taiwanese goods can come to Lithuania because it can't use the BRI, it can't use the Chinese BRI. And if you have to take it via ships, you have to sail all around the world, and we're talking about going through the Suez Canal, go all the way around Europe, because Lithuania is the northern part of the northern, obviously the north part of Europe, and imagine the shipping costs that would be. It is almost impossible in terms of shipping costs. There's no way economically that would be viable. And secondly, Lithuania, for example. China has obviously blacklisted anything Lithuanian, and I believe there was a German car company which used to use tires coming from Lithuania, and China said nope, we're not going to use that. Get another supplier, and overnight every single item that was coming from Lithuania stopped coming to China. Not only coming to China, but also stopped coming into Europe because, as you know, German companies have got very, very major business pact with China. All the German cars have factories in China. Any small part coming from Lithuania, China would immediately say no, and Germans would be forced to use another part from another country or make it themselves. So imagine the economic impact on Lithuania. And I can understand Lithuania being, having some sort of issue with Russia because of the past. But why have issues with China? It doesn't make sense.
And I can comment on this. And I'm going to pass it to Brian because I just want to get it off my chest here. I see comments about them being stubborn. Yeah, they are stubborn. They're incredibly nice people, but this little country has had its government replaced so many times, but they have been brainwashed, guys. They have been hit so hard with the Western media when they were tooting the horns about them coming, you're part of the European Union. The sideshows came to town. The Bushes came to town. They said, this is great. You guys are NATO. You got to remember, they felt that they were going from, zero to hero overnight. And it looked like that. The euphoria of being in that country when it became part of the European Union, everyone saw their wealth increase and prices, and they thought they could never do wrong. Well, here is the day when you get a crazy government in there, and it's hard for me to talk about this country like this. I like Lithuania. I mean, my wife's from there. It's a beautiful country, but politically, what an absolute mess. The government is definitely not working for the people. It's working for the man, and that man is Uncle Sam and the U.S. government and the collective West. They've got Lithuania right where they want them. They wanted a little thorn in there to make a mess. They got it, and they got it with Ukraine. Brian, sorry, go ahead.
No, that's pretty much the exact same point I was going to make. The Lithuanian government is not Lithuanian. It doesn't answer to the Lithuanian people or the best interests of the country. It answers to Washington. It was installed into power by Washington. All of these Eastern European countries, they have had regimes installed, just like Ukraine in 2014. And we always hear the story that Russia is upset because these nations are picking NATO and the EU over Russia. No, they're not. They have governments in power that want the best of both worlds. They want a relationship with Russia and the West, but that is not allowed. So they overthrow that government, just like in Ukraine in 2014, and they install a client regime that will irrationally, these are people, again, fanatics, they will irrationally cut all ties with Russia, destroy their economy, and sign up for whatever Washington tells them. And then the process starts, the brainwashing. They take over the media. The U.S. pumps millions. Victoria Nuland said billions were pumped into Ukraine to reshape its political system after the collapse of the Soviet Union. They take over the media. They start maneuvering opposition groups into power. The media starts working on the people. They infest the education system. They start rewriting history books. That's not just in Eastern Europe. That is what they're doing in Taiwan right now. This is what they're doing here in Southeast Asia. The U.S.-backed opposition here in Thailand. They're trying to rewrite history, and their hallmark is being anti-China, irrationally anti-China. It's Thailand's most important trade partner, an increasingly important security partner. In all kinds of ways, you can tangibly see the relationship between China and Thailand benefiting the people. But these U.S.-backed opposition parties and leaders, they will literally come out and say, we're going to cancel the high-speed train with China. Yeah. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? Because Washington told them to, and because it would hurt China, and it would damage all of Asia, because the U.S. doesn't want any competitors. They want everyone subjugated to them. And the only way, if you are a small percentage of the global population and you're trying to subjugate the rest of the world, the only way you can do it is just by knocking everything over, destroying everything, not allowing people to develop. That is the hallmark. And if you look at Eastern Europe, isn't that what has happened?
Yeah, it's an interesting, Brian. And AJ, do you want me to wait to answer to that? Or?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So, Brian, I mean, we are sharing a very common thought here. When I arrived in Lithuania over a couple of decades ago, you used to see UN buses, white and black, writing on the sides of buses in Lithuania. The UN was there. The NGOs are all over that place. Okay. And I already started to have really my doubts about these organizations. You would meet these people in the center of Lithuania, Vilnius. Hi, how are you? Good. What do you do here? Well, I belong to an NGO. Oh, okay. Yeah. They pay really well. And you're wondering, hundreds of Americans there. And it's strange because after that, bunch of traveling. I lived in Thailand for 6 or 7 years as well. And you will love this story, Brian. I lived in a pretty nice condo called the River Condo near the Chao Phraya, near one of the shopping malls. And at that time, I had a New Year's party. And at the New Year's party, I had a lot of Americans. And I'm not picking on Americans here, but I need to use this as a prime example to really support what Brian is saying here. Sitting in my New Year's party, I had a few people come and I said, oh, where are you from? Well, I work for the United Nations. Another girl said that she worked for UNICEF. And I said, well, that's interesting. I said, I remember collecting money for UNICEF when I was a young kid. Those little UNICEF boxes. I don't know if you guys know what I'm talking about, but you get a few pennies and some coins in there and you'd hand them in there. Well, she said to me, well, thanks for paying for my first class ticket. Can you imagine that? Saying that to somebody who thought that that these organizations were actually out to actually help people. And it's riddled Thailand. I tell you, Brian, I've seen so many NGOs roll through that place. It's incredible. And it's toxic. And the salaries that they're making there, they're living the high life, spreading a bunch of BS and really trying to destabilize. I seen it in Thailand. It's everywhere. I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. You think that this would be a country, people that are just enjoying themselves as backpackers, but hell no. There are a lot of Americans running around that city as NGOs. I mean, any cleanup happening, Brian?
Well, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there is. There was an NGO draft NGO law that was supposed to. They're doing it maybe slowly, so slowly that if you increase the heat slowly enough, nobody really notices. They don't want to create any kind of major row with the U.S. That this is how Thailand has always done business. But just your point about seeing these UN buses and these NGO vehicles. When I traveled to Laos many years ago, that's all you would see is these NGO SUVs driving around on dirt roads in the capital. It's the capital city, but they've got dirt roads. And if Laos did not have a relationship with China, and if China was not rising, and if it did not have a good relationship with Thailand and Vietnam, and if it only depended on the West and these fake NGOs, they would be impoverished indefinitely because they don't build anything. They're keeping it that way on purpose. They're keeping them dependent on handouts and keeping them underdeveloped on purpose. There were banners across the road in Vientiane, the capital, that said, turn off your lights, don't keep your lights on at night, use less electricity. They're impeding development on purpose for precisely the reason I said, for the US to dominate. China, putting that high-speed rail line through Laos, that has changed the face of the country. And even before that, China was building highways. Thailand and Vietnam were investing. That progress is what's lifting Laos out. And these NGOs really have no role to play in all of that because they don't do anything. They impede anything happening.
That's right, Brian. I was looking at some of the trade figures as well, and it doesn't really matter how much the train line has cost between China, I believe the city of Kunming, all the way to the capital of Laos. And I was looking at the trade figures, and the GDP figures of Kunming have shot through the roof. I think they've doubled. The city has doubled in terms of GDP and trade with Laos. And the Laos capital, its GDP has almost tripled since a couple of years ago. And these are amazing figures, and you can just the amount of trade and volume of goods are traveling between the countries. And Laos is just really developing fast. I think that was the missing link that Laos was missing all of these years. Suddenly the country is just, developing because you have all these Chinese companies now moving into Laos and, setting up factories because it's obviously cheaper to set up factories in Laos. Now you have a trade link. There's a lot of mining goods going back and forth. The trade between China and Laos is unbelievable. And however much that train line has cost, I believe they've already recouped that in many ways. And the funny thing is, Brian, I remember listening to one of your videos, and you mentioned an opposition party leader in Thailand who wanted to push for hyperloops or something, and then get rid of the high-speed rail lines and put something in place that doesn't even exist. It doesn't exist in the United States, anywhere in the world. It's not even a proven technology, and it's not even a technology that really exists. And he was going around trying to sell the hyperloop. It's like talking about jump before you can walk. I mean, I just thought that was absolutely hilarious. In many ways.
He's a billionaire. He works with another billionaire, both completely backed by the U.S. These mobs they've got out in the streets, these are all either openly, well, I wouldn't say openly because they'll constantly lie about it, but members of these NGOs are also protest leaders. They promote it. They have a huge media presence because Thailand is over dependent on US-based social media networks, which rigged the system here in Thailand specifically to shape the political landscape, the information space. And yes, he went to the United States. He was campaigning for office in 2019. And part of his campaign was going to the United States, because he was using a lobbyist and they had to do a FARA disclosure. You could see the list of USA, the State Department, all of these very shady regime change organizations. And now he is the beneficiary of US regime change organizations propping up his protests. And he visited the Hyperloop test track in Nevada. It's like 500 meters long. It's not even a real full working article of what Hyperloop was supposed to be. And then he came back to Thailand and he was literally doing PowerPoints saying, we need this. He even said this, and in some of my videos about this, I even have the clip where he's like, we need to rebalance away from China back to the United States and Europe and Japan. I mean, verbatim, what the U.S. State Department's talking points are. He met with U.S. State Department representatives when he was in the U.S. before he made this speech. It's so transparent. They do the exact same thing over and over again. Doesn't matter what country. If there's a protest, just follow the money. Find out who the leaders are, what the name of the organizations are, and do a search with National Endowment for Democracy, USAID. And if it pops up, then that's what you're looking at. You're looking at a color revolution. They'll have all kinds of fancy sayings, prey on people's ignorance of a particular situation. And at face value, it looks like something you should get behind. But of course, it's not. It's the exact opposite of what it portrays itself as. So this, and we were talking about Ukraine and how it's being destroyed because it's being used as a proxy by the United States. This is what they're trying to do to all of Southeast Asia. They want to overthrow the China-friendly governments here and change the China-friendly population, because another key aspect of these protests is encouraging extremely anti-China points of view and using Western propaganda to put these ideas into people's heads. The Uyghur genocide, there was an NED-funded fake Uyghur NGO run by a white woman, by the way, an American white woman. And she came to Thailand, and she's lecturing Thai students about how the horrible Chinese government is genociding the Uyghurs, which is a complete fabrication. It is like WMDs. It's just deliberately, completely fabricated. And this is what they're doing to the population, to turn them anti-Chinese, even though that is definitely not in the best interest of the region. I mean, Southeast Asia is thriving because of China is rising, everyone is rising with them. These are countries that have relationships that go back centuries. This is not in your best interest to pick a fight with China. It's only in Washington's best interest. That is very important to point this out.
Exactly. We'll move on to China in a bit, but let's finish off with Ukraine. I wanted to ask you the fact that obviously we know who's behind the NordStream 2, and the Polish ex-minister recently obviously tweeted that thank you USA. I mean, we all know that, and he got removed. But what I didn't know, which I only found out a few days ago, that his wife sits at the board of the NED. And I did not know that. And it just goes to show that he must have had some sort of inside information from the National Endowment of Democracy, and whether they had something to do with it. But that's not the question. The question is, obviously, we've seen the images of Russia blowing up Ukraine's infrastructure and stuff like that. And this is just a hunch, really. I mean, the blowing up of the Crimean Bridge was one thing. But then after that, I looked at Twitter, and I saw hundreds and thousands of images of people taking selfies in front of this postage stamp thing in Ukraine and smiling and celebrating. And I'm not talking about hundreds here, I'm talking about thousands. And Twitter was trending. It was retweeted like millions of times. And I'm just thinking, was that the trigger? And Russia said, you know what, screw it. Let's just, we've been holding back against Ukraine. These people do not care about us. These people are just humiliating us, completely brainwashed. Let's just go for it and start, blowing up their infrastructure. Do you think that was the trigger, and they're going to go further with it?
Maybe sort of. What you can see going on is this whole operation that Russia has begun. This is going in phases. They have different phases. There's different things that if they can, they would really like to accomplish it during the phase. But if not, then they have to escalate. And so, yes, most definitely, they were going to have to escalate anyway. But attacking the Crimean Bridge, that just gave them actually an obligation to retaliate. And they most likely had this planned. They were going to begin it anyway. And like I said, Ukraine doesn't do anything in their own best interest. They are doing things that are so counterproductive and self-destructive that, so you blew up this bridge. It's civilian infrastructure. You can say that it has a military purpose, but you could say that about all infrastructure in Ukraine. So you just made it that much easier for Russia to justify hitting these power plants and anything else, any other type of infrastructure. So they're painting themselves into this corner because they won't stop, and they won't stop because they're not thinking about what's in their best interest. They're being encouraged by Washington, and the people in Kiev really don't care what happens to Ukraine anyway.
So I have a question for Alex. So obviously we know that the Russian troops have, there's about 300,000 Russian troops who have been called and been sent to Ukraine. What do you think is the next step? Do you think they're going to march all the way to Odessa and go all the way to Transnistria and get Transnistria joined with its motherland? Or are we seeing that happening slowly, or do you think that they're going to stay as they are and just defend what they have? What do you think, Alex? And we'll go to Brian afterwards.
Sure. I mean, visiting Transnistria 4 times in the last decade, more to try to understand how that country works. Don't worry about my camera. It's just clicked off here. But you have to understand that this area has always supported Russia, since the late 80s, early 1990s. So really, we have a small sliver of land that needs to connect with Odessa down. Do I think they're going to do this over the winter? I'm going to share what Brian's vision is here. I think they're going to dig in deep. What is the rush? What is the real rush to really get that territory? Now, maybe I haven't listened to the latest of your, maybe things have changed this morning, Brian, but my understanding is, they're organizing, they're getting all their ducks in line, as we can call it, and they're taking their time. I don't really see that there is a need for, a massive offensive, but I do see that the Ukraine is definitely going to have to justify a lot of the money that is going into the country. And as Brian has always said, and never, ever left this comment, is it's not Ukraine that's making the decisions here. It's the Congress in the United States. It's the senators that are connected to military companies. These are the guys that are calling the shots. And it is, hey, Alinsky, show us some little love so that we can write some more checks to fund this bizarre mission that you're going to lose. You got to remember that Ukraine continues to bomb what used to be part of its territory. When they're sending rockets into the Donetsk and the Luhansk area, that used to be a territory that got along with the rest of the country. When I hear Zelensky say, well, we're going to fight until we get every last little bit back, you're the same asshole that supported shutting pensions off to that part of the country since 2014. You're the same jerk that supported blowing up the Donetsk airport. So what are you talking about that you really care about the rest of the country when you're sending rockets over there at the same time? It's like Canada would be shelling Quebec, and our prime minister saying, well, we really want Canada to be unified again. Well, they blow up the infrastructure. These guys are maniacs. They got their perfect puppet master in there. Alinsky, he's fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. And well, you know what? America loves it because the checks continue to keep being written into the billions. I don't know, Brian, how am I doing on this analyzing of this?
Well, yeah, a lot of people say Ukraine has to show something. They have to do something to show for all of this money. But you have to remember, this is a proxy war. So the people sponsoring this proxy war, they want it to keep going. They're trying to overextend Russia. This is what they have written in their own policy papers. That is the purpose of this. And it's also to incrementally encircle, contain, divide, and destroy Russia itself. That is the whole purpose of all of this. So that it's not like the people sponsoring this need any additional motivation to continue doing it. The problem is there are limitations to how long they can do this. And Russia is planning on outlasting them. You watch Ukraine trying to take Kherson City, and a lot of people will debate, is Russia going to hold the city? Will they be forced to leave it? It doesn't matter, because no matter what, Ukraine is going to be losing most of its army trying to do this. They lose brigades worth now between Kherson and Kharkov. They've been losing brigades worth of men. And if you're looking at the numbers, even according to the Ukrainian government, these are huge losses of men every month. They cannot continue doing this. Worse than that, well, yeah, losing human life, there's nothing worse than that. But in terms of fighting capacity, they're losing heavy equipment. You cannot get, once you run out of it, you're not getting any more of it, not anytime soon. And this is the situation Ukraine is in. They're scraping together whatever tanks they have left. They're even talking about, where are we going to get more tanks from? Because there's no more Eastern Bloc countries, former Eastern Bloc countries, that have Soviet era tanks that they can send Ukraine, that they're able to use. Western main battle tanks are not. It's impractical to use them. Even if you had the time to train them and everything, it's still impractical for many reasons that I've talked about. just basic things like ammunition, artillery ammunition, small arms ammunition. All of these things are dwindling. And you look at the packages the West is sending Ukraine, and they get smaller and smaller and smaller. And as that is happening, and now we're looking at this next phase of fighting. Russia is bringing together 300,000. They're not conscripts that were yanked off the streets. These are men with a military background, maybe not combat experience, but they have experience in the military. And there's going to be equipment that goes along with them. 300,000, and all of that equipment is going to reinforce Russian forces on the front line already. What does Ukraine have that they can reinforce their front lines with? This is, I said it over and over again, this is not a turning point for Ukraine. These offensives that they launched were an all or nothing affair, where they threw absolutely everything they had at where they thought Russian lines were weak, or where, because of political reasons, they felt they had to, because Kherson is far from a Russian weak point. But they're throwing everything they have at these points, and possibly other offensives with whatever they've got left. When that's over, what are they going to have to replace all these losses with? Even the Washington Post. Oh no, go ahead. I can go on.
No, yeah, I was gonna. You finished, and I'll go ahead. You mentioned something about the Washington Post.
Sure. The Western media, the Washington Post and New York Times, they've all taken turns writing articles about the horrific losses Ukraine is suffering. And they themselves admit, when Ukraine pushes, they lose huge amounts of men and equipment. Russian forces are not standing and fighting. If they risk losing large numbers of troops, or they risk being encircled and captured, they just fall back. And they preserve the lives of their men. They preserve the majority of their equipment. And as they fall back and Ukraine is following them, Ukrainian forces are following them, Ukrainian forces are being decimated. They're driving tanks out in open fields, subjecting themselves to the summation of Russian artillery, rocket fire, missiles, military aviation in that area. It's suicidal, and it is not sustainable. So when they are done with these offensives, they're going to find themselves overextended, thinned out, and without reinforcements, without heavy equipment to replace what they've lost. And Russia will have preserved their men and their machines, plus they're bringing in 300,000 more troops. So, but I mean, it doesn't take a military expert to figure out how that's going to unfold.
Yes, Brian, I was going to add to that as well. Completely agree with you guys. And I've heard yesterday that the United States is pushing through a bill worth 500 or 50 billion, I believe. Or 500
Yeah,
million?
I
No,
think
50,
that's what,
no,
right?
50 billion, yeah. And also Ursula 2 days ago has said that she's going to provide 1.5 billion per month to Ukraine as well. So first of all, what power does Ursula have to give away European funds to Ukraine? First of all, she's not even elected by the people. Secondly, while the Europeans right now are suffering with lack of food, lack of heat, she's sending European money all the way to Ukraine without any referendum, without any votes. And secondly, what I was going to talk about is obviously you mentioned about all of these lives that Ukraine's losing. I mean, don't forget the amount of people that are leaving Ukraine. I mean, you have women and children leaving Ukraine. They're not going to come back. I mean, there's stories in UK every single day how Ukrainian women are getting off with British men and getting married and settling down here. And I can imagine it's probably the same all over Europe. And when women, young single Ukrainian women go to another country, they're not going to come back. They'll find someone else and they'll settle down. And these kids will go to school. They'll grow up. They'll have boyfriends, girlfriends, and they'll settle down in another country. What is the point of going back to Ukraine when you see it completely destroyed? And there's figures around. There's ridiculous figures how many people, refugees, are leaving Ukraine every single day. And what will be left of Ukraine? There's no businesses there. If you can't run a business because all of your trade links are completely cut off, and once Odessa goes, and that's it, you cannot trade through the sea anymore. You'll be completely stuck. And and like you said, Alex, all Russia has to do is just sit down and wait. See, if you have these soldiers just protecting what they have, they can just wait until Ukraine just completely collapses, and they will collapse because Russia's got no problem. They're happily selling oil and gas to China, to India, and the rest of the Southeast Asian countries. They don't, they have still money coming in. They don't care about Western sanctions. But where is Ukraine getting money from? I mean, Ukraine is only getting money from handouts, and like you said, Brian, it's getting less and less and less. And we're not even sure if this 50 billion will even pass Congress. I know they're trying to push it through before the midterms because this is the only time they can do it, because after the midterms, they can't push anything through because it's going to be very difficult for them. What are your thoughts, guys? I mean, I think Ukraine is completely destroyed, and all they have to do is sit and wait. And once Ukraine collapses, Russia can pretty much go in and put any government in there as they can. Ukraine will probably be split between East Ukraine and West Ukraine. A rump state somewhere, maybe somewhere in the middle. What's your thoughts, Brian and Alex? I'll start with you, Brian, and we'll go to Alex.
Well, you can keep sending or finding all of this money, but what are you going to buy once all of the supplies, the equipment, the heavy weapons, the ammunition, once it's all gone, you have to physically make more. It doesn't matter how much money you have, and that takes time to do that they don't have. They simply don't have the time, and that goes for everything else. And when you're looking at the energy crisis that is developing, you're talking about factories, the price of doing business skyrocketing or being so high that you simply can't keep producing. So you're going to shutter your business. And an economy, although many in the West seem to have forgotten this, it revolves around actual, real, tangible things. It revolves around actually making something. And they're painting themselves into a corner where they're not going to be able to do this. They're going to be out of the things that they need. They don't seem like they've planned this thing out the whole way. Now, I want to continue having this conversation, but I just need like a real quick intermission. I will be right back.
Sure.
Alex?
We'll move on to Alex, then we'll
Sure.
carry on with you.
Sure,
So,
sure.
Alex, what do you
Right.
think? How long do you think Ukraine has got? How long do you think Zelensky has got?
Well, let's back up here. We're talking about Ursula. Ursula is not paid to care. She's paid to scare. And that is her role. She's there to say, we understand the fear. We stand behind Ukraine. No, you don't, lady. You don't. Let's be honest. That country has gone down the same line as Libya. Now, what's going to happen to Ukraine? What are they going to do? How are they going to rebuild? They're not going to rebuild. If you think that the European Union money by an unelected figure like Ursula von der Crazy is not going to get their money back, oh, they will. But they will at the expense of every single tangible asset above the ground in the Ukraine and below the ground in the Ukraine. You bet they're going to get their money back, whether it's a pipeline, whether it's a logistical railway that is maybe damaged for the moment, power plants, airports, the next future generations tax base. America will get their money back somehow, some way. How are they going to get out of this mess? They're not. When people think that this war can end next week or 1 month and everything's going to be great, no, it's not. Ukraine's gone. It's gone. It's finished. It's over. That's the whole game plan here, everyone. It's not to help the yellow and blue flag, that the rest of the world thinks is being bullied by big bad Russia. No. This has been going on for a long time. You just had to listen to that leaked call that we had on the program yesterday. America put the government in there. I'm still waiting for that election from Yanukovych that took place. Oh, it didn't. That's right, because the American government put the government in there. And then they got the candy man, Poroshenko, to take over and babysit the country, and so he could still sell his candies and make cash. The assets are gone, guys. It's finished. Ukraine has been asset stripped. It's like a debt trap. It's over. So that's how they're going to get their money back, whether it's mineral rights, whether it's oil and gas rights, whether it's commission for pumping oil and gas from Russia. When they open the lines again, they will, because there's a saying: you can walk the soil of Ukraine, you can walk it on the top, but you scratch below the surface. Those are Soviet and those are Russian pipelines that are right underneath that ground. And Ukraine was happy to take lots of money for decades and decades and decades. Well, they've just signed the deal with the devil, and they just signed the deal with the devil's wife, Ursula. Like I said, she's not there to care. She's there to scare. Brian, over to you.
Yeah. I mean, again, we were talking about Lithuania. We were talking about Ukraine being a client regime of U.S. interests, and following the dictates of Washington at the cost of the Ukrainian people. The EU, I mean, that's just a small microcosm of what the whole EU is. These are bureaucrats who have been installed by the same circle of special interest corporations, financial institutions. They put all of these people into power in Europe, not to represent Europe's best interests or those of the European people. That is self-evident. I mean, you just look and see they're not doing anything that is in the interests of the people. I forget which German politician said she doesn't care about the German people, where she's going to continue supporting Ukraine, which is it in a nutshell. She's doing what Washington is telling her to do. She doesn't care what the cost is for Germany. She doesn't work for the German people. And so we're going to watch Ukraine destroyed. We're going to watch Europe follow it. This is how this whole thing works. That's how empire works. It is a process of extraction. They're not investing in anything. This is extraction. And so, I mean, if we're trying to figure out how long is Ukraine going to last, how long is the EU, I mean, it's impossible to tell. But this is a huge, just like I think you were saying, Alex, I just caught part of it. This is going to be this is a catastrophe, and this is a catastrophe with ramifications that will reverberate for years and years to come. This is not going to be over anytime soon. Yes, okay. Bearbach. Yeah, someone in the comment section.
We'll talk a bit about Europe in a second. I just want to answer this super chat from Elena Diaz. Do you think Russia will deliver gas via NS2? No, because NS2 is destroyed, and as long as the German government stay as they are, puppets of the United States, they will not allow that to happen. So going back to Europe, I mean, we've seen how UK pound is falling, the inflation is going through the roof. I mean, things are really bad in UK, guys. I mean, 10%, 11% inflation, what the government sends out, that's not the real figure. I mean, I just have to go to the supermarket and find out, everything that was costing what it is now. Last year, exactly this time last year, it was about 50% less or 100% less, like butter, basic necessities. Butter's doubled in price in a year. Everything has almost doubled or even gone up 50%, 60%, 70%. People's bills have gone up 4 times. Interest rates have risen. People have to pay extra £400 or £500 a month. Britain is absolutely screwed, pardon my language, and people are going to start losing their homes in the next few months. And you've seen the circus that is happening with the UK government. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've cancelled my Netflix subscription because there's so much drama happening in the UK government. I can just sit back and just watch all that drama unfold, and it'll save me a lot of money with Netflix. But then you have Germany as well, and Germany is completely deindustrializing. You hear about the BMW plants moving out of UK, going into China. You heard about the BASF plant moving from Germany, going into China. And this BASF plant is a very important plant, and that produces stuff that the world needs, for example, fertilizer and other chemicals as well. You hear Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes opening up new plants all over China. There's stories about how these German companies are also moving in the United States. But personally, I just do not see the business sense in moving to the United States. Yeah, energy might be cheap, but then you got the cost of, you got the inflation problems, you have the cost of living over there, The wages are high, and it will cost a company 4 or 5 times more expensive to set up in the US compared to China. I don't think that story is true. I think that's what the United States wants to happen, wants to move all the European companies into US. But reality, I don't think that's the case. So my question is, why are these ridiculous leaders allowing all of this to happen? I'm talking about the German leaders. I'm talking about the UK leaders, and let's talk about the Germans first. I mean, these guys, they know who did they know who blew up the Nord Stream 2. And you have people like Scholz, who sits there like a dummy when Biden stands next to him saying, we're going to shut down Nord Stream. And Scholz just sits there like a dummy, takes it. And they're almost like, how would you say, little poodles where you can do whatever you want with them and they just don't say anything back. Let's start with Germany. We'll go into UK and the rest of Europe. But, what's going on here, guys? Why are they so oblivious to what's happening to them and how, they're allowing the US to completely ransack their countries? And also I also want to say that Macron and the German minister recently said that LNG prices are way too high and US is selling it 4 times as much to us compared to what they're selling it at home. Is this a start of them like complaining? I mean, what's going on? I'll start with Brian and we'll move on to Alex.
It was all extremely predictable. Alex Cristoforo from the Duran did a hilarious video where he was talking about France and Macron being surprised. Do you mean sending LNG over the ocean is more expensive than piping it in from existing pipes from Russia? Who could have predicted this? Well, it is extremely predictable, and these people would have to be beyond incompetent for all of this to happen, and them actually trying to improve the condition of the European people in their respective countries. The Germans, for example, this is a country with a very large industrial base. When the United States looks at Germany, Germany with an independent foreign policy is going to work with Russia, and together they will be stronger. It will work with China, and together they will be stronger. And if Germany is working with Russia and China and all together becoming stronger across Eurasia, so will the rest of Europe. They will follow. And this was something that they would not allow. They would rather burn absolutely everything down rather than allow that to happen and usurp U.S. hegemony around the globe. Just think about what they did during the Vietnam War. They killed millions of people to try to stop the nations in Southeast Asia and then beyond that from reasserting their sovereignty. That was post World War II. This was the United States working with former imperial powers, France, the UK, trying to reassert control over these regions around the world. That's what those wars were about. And throughout the process, the U.S. began absorbing these socio-political networks. The EU bureaucracy that was created to supplant national sovereignty across Europe, and it clearly has. And the current German government is doing exactly what would benefit the United States and only the United States. They're doing it at the cost of the German people, their industry, and these are things that are almost irreversible. I mean, this type of damage, you're going to have to start all over again. You're not going to be able to save what you had. You're going to have to build all of that back up on your own again because of the damage that is being done. It's deliberate. I was following the Nord Stream 2 story for years when they were talking about it and then building it, and it was almost tangible how desperately the U.S. was to stop that. They would do almost anything to stop that. And when China was talking about Belt and Road Initiative and having that connect to Europe, the U.S. would do almost anything to stop that. And so they went as far as literally blowing up the pipeline, and they have gone as far as literally physically attacking the infrastructure, rail lines, pipelines of the Belt and Road Initiative. The U.S. doesn't do it, but they are arming and backing separatist groups that are all across Eurasia. It is almost like a world war unfolding asymmetrically And it is the United States fighting everyone, ally and enemy alike, to try to sustain its hegemony over the planet. It's madness.
Sure. So before we move on to China and Taiwan, Alex, why do these Western leaders have no common sense, first of all? Secondly, I don't remember Chancellor Merkel, caving into the West or the United States. She was pushing back a lot of stuff. She had good relationships with Russia. She had good relationships with the West. Now that she's gone, it seems like Germany's just falling apart. I mean, it goes back to my first question: why are Western leaders? Why do they not have any common sense? I mean, just basic common sense. What's going on around the world?
Well, let's clear up Angela Merkel. This is a lady whose phone was tapped by the U.S. government. So I think she was very careful on what kind of information she did share. But let's be very clear here. You are talking, and if we're focusing on European politics, simply they don't give a shit what you and I think. They don't care. What do I base that on? I base it on many things. Who's holding them accountable? No one. Do they care if they get voted out of the office? Not really. All you have to do, and I've gained this knowledge from spending almost 2 decades in Monte Carlo at Monaco, which is a tax haven in the southern part of France. It's an independent country, small country, 35,000 people, but packs a punch when it comes to banking and banking secrecy. When the Pandora Papers and the Panama Papers came out, and I encourage everyone who is not familiar with those documents, it's very easy to log into that website.
I'm sorry, Alex. I'm just going to have to pop out for a few minutes.
Sure.
I've got
No
a
problem,
work
AJ.
call, so I'll join
Okay.
you guys in a minute. Yeah.
Sounds good. So it doesn't take long for you to log into this system. It's kind of the Google of all the, we'll call it elites that are, we'll say, maybe doing backdoor deals or having offshore accounts. I'll give you an example. Why not? Let's give you an example of a couple of Europeans, political leaders that have bank accounts that are made offshore. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that people that have offshore bank accounts are doing anything wrong. Some of them are to protect assets, of course. Yachts protect or put in companies in case a owner has a civil claim against them, or to also kind of keep the identity secret. But if we look at the Panama Papers, this was leaked by the Mossack Fonseca firm that was in Panama. That's why it's got its legendary name, the Panama Papers. For example, the Iceland prime minister, little country, that we don't hear much about, Iceland. He and his wife, Sigmundur David, and his wife allegedly used a secret offshore firm called Witris Incorporated to hide money in the British Virgin Islands. Reports claim he owned multi-millions of dollars from the Icelandic bank bonds during the financial crisis. That's just one minor little example. But as I was scrolling down, just quickly looking at this, another name came to my attention. And here it is. Ukraine's president at the time, after 2014, the legendary himself, Petro Poroshenko, is the sole shareholder of Prime Asset Partners Limited, a company set up in the British Virgin Islands after assuming office in 2014. He pledged to sell most of his assets, all of which were transferred to Prime Assets Capital. Now, why do these guys set up these types of incorporations? They use trusts to become nominees of these companies to hide who the beneficial owner is of these companies. Having 20 years of experience in Monte Carlo, you do tend to start to understand how these structures work and the people behind it and the money that is involved in it. Does German politicians care about accountability? No, because no one can hold them accountable. Do governments have enough money to go after these, to try to get documents turned over in another jurisdiction that is hidden by a law firm that is backed up by another firm that has people be the fronts for these countries and companies? No, they don't. They haven't been successful. And even if they do try to find out who the beneficial owner is, then they have to get the banks to release that information. Very, very, very difficult. So if you don't think that this Ukraine war is generating money for a lot of these politicians, as Brian has consistently said, there is much more going on behind the scenes. Now, when it comes to China, good luck trying to get away with this kind of stuff in the country that I'm living in right now, because the politicians here are accountable. And there's probably some people viewing today wondering, where I'm going with this. I'm in China. I've been here in and out of China, traveling from this country since 2003. I decided, like Brian, to take China on as a project to try to educate myself and educate the world on what really is going on in this country from a content creator's view. I work with a local media company here to collaborate, and they give me access to a lot of stuff that the average person can't get to. And I can tell you something, that since coming to become the chairman, President Xi has really cracked down on corruption in a pretty amazing way. There's figures between 100,000 to 270,000 arrests or detainments or massive investigations and criminal prosecutions that have come. Now, people might say, wait a moment, that sounds like a leader that is cracking down. Well, yeah, he did crack down. And yes, China has forged forward on a successful route. Imagine having somebody in power in Germany that would like to crack down on corruption. Would the German press or the international press be saying, what a bad guy, he's combating corruption? And Brian, about this stuff.
They
know about it.
They might do that because that's the reason why AJ's question was, why are they doing it? Because they're corrupt and they're puppets of the West. And if you were a German politician trying to clean things up, they would absolutely go after you and bury you. And so yes, they might. Sorry to interrupt, but yeah, they might do that.
I mean, Brian, you have an interest in China. AJ's gone. He'll be back soon. Just want to say thank you to all the amazing people that have come up to the program today. I've taken the back seat here and let AJ, this is his channel, this is his subscribers, and a lot of Brian's subscribers have also come in. If you're not aware, if you're coming in from Brian's platform, AJ has a couple of channels. All the links are in the description below, right down there. They're all there. Don't forget to subscribe to Brian's channel. Amazing, amazing channel. And the growth of his channel has been absolutely explosive. There's a reason why these channels are growing. There's a reason why Brian's channel is growing at the rate that it's doing, is because people want the truth. Plain and simple. And he does amazing work. I also do what I can to report out of China. I'm starting to get into very deep investigative pieces here in the last couple of weeks. You can subscribe to my channel below, Reportify Media, as well as the news organization that I collaborate with is iChongqing. And don't forget to also subscribe to AJ's channel. I'm going to now go over to Brian, and I would like to really ask you a question. Since being in Thailand there, you have witnessed NGOs that are trying to destabilize the country. You've also been witnessing them trying to get into the political parties. Do you think China is going to have a problem with this type of tactics from the collective West in trying to infiltrate China? Or is China that kind of unbeatable country that they won't allow this to go on? Your thoughts on that? I really would like to hear it.
Well, it's obvious that the leadership in China are aware of what the US's game is. So they're aware of it, and they have taken very serious measures against it. And they're measures that any country would take. We hear in the Western media, oh, look at China cracking down on those peaceful protesters in Hong Kong, that was all funded by the US. And if China was funding mobs, violent mobs in, say, New York City, all of those organizations, the leadership would be thrown in jail. Those organizations would be uprooted, and rightfully so. It's a violation of another nation's sovereignty. It's a violation of the UN Charter. So this is what China has done. China is in a position now where they can do this. Decades ago, they were not as strong, and there were a lot of things that they had to go along with because they simply did not have the power to do so. Even now, they try to be careful with the way they uproot or deal with malign foreign influence in their internal political affairs. Look at Taiwan. They're not all powerful. They do not have the ability to just sweep aside U.S. meddling, even within their own territory. Taiwan is part of China.
It's interesting, Brian, that you bring up Hong Kong there. I flew from Thailand to Hong Kong to cover that protest, and I was greeted by not protesters, I was greeted by rioters. I just want to clear the air on my thoughts on that.
Absolutely.
Coming into the country, I tried to apply for media accreditation. And the bizarre thing is I tried for 5 days to try to get my press pass for Hong Kong. And all arrows continued to point me to Apple. I think it was called Apple Daily. You know who I'm talking about? It's one of the news organizations. Its founder now in jail.
Yeah.
And maybe you can explain to the audience about who I'm talking and what organization.
Hanging out. I forget what was his name. Do you remember? But I remember he was sitting in the White House, openly conspiring with the U.S. government to overthrow the Chinese government.
And they told me before I could, they said, wait a minute, no, you can't cover it. And I'm who's, and it was bizarre because I was trying to get my press pass. I was coming from Thailand. I said, the hell with this. I'm just going to go get my hats printed. I'm going to wear, a yellow fluorescent vest, just like all the other media that was on site there. And as soon as I got down there, and I covered this on my channel, as soon as I got into Hong Kong, I thought, whoa. Okay, wait a minute. The press that's reporting there are not who you think they are. And I was very careful. I was, ducking and weaving through a lot of press. And there was a lot of press there, guys. There was a ton of press, but they were telling quite the interesting story, completely different from what I was seeing. Completely different, lying. And it was, Jimmy Lai. That's the guy's name.
Jimmy Lai.
And this guy, I have to tell you, they must have been buying all the Google AdWords for Hong Kong press passes, because every time I pressed a link for information or tried to get information for the press pass, it kept linking to their channel. And then I got a response back from them that says, oh yes, what organization you with? Send us a copy of your documentation. We'll take care of you. And what hotel and what location you're staying at. I said, BS to that. Got on the plane anyway. Hopped off the plane in Hong Kong, let the camera start rolling, and started to realize very quick that the show that they were telling the world, the media there, sorry boys, nice try. There's content creators out there that are going to get the real message out. And here we are. I mean, Jimmy Lai, they called him. But you're right, Brian. I mean, you're right on. The U.S. is going to try to penetrate here in China, but do you think they're going to have any success at doing this?
I think their desperation stems from the fact that they have been pushed out of everywhere. They were operating in Tibet as far back as the 50s. I still have people, Brian, free Tibet. The China invaded Tibet. Just go to the State Department's website. They admit it was a CIA operation all the way back to the 50s and has been ever since. So they were pushed out of Tibet. They were pushed out of Xinjiang. They were pushed out of Hong Kong. Now the U.S., its last foothold is Taiwan. And so they're playing that for all it's worth. That's where they're going to try to make their move. They really don't have the ability to get into the rest of China. The reason why is because China realizes what's going on. They see their information space as a domain as important to protect as a nation's airspace, its shores, its land borders. They see information space as just as important to protect, to prevent the US from entering into it and running amok, just like if you just let a bunch of US tanks running around on your streets. They cannot allow US government to pour millions, if not billions, into the media environment in China, because what will they do? People are impressionable. They're going to watch this, they're going to read this, they're going to get brainwashed, they're going to start thinking that there are things that they want that are actually not in their best interest. Think about what they've done to Ukraine. That's exactly how they did that. They brainwashed many people in a country to the point where they are suicidal. They are going to their deaths to fight for NATO's right to menace Russia on its own border. They're doing the same thing in Taiwan right now. They block out anything that is remotely pro-China or an alternative voice to what's going on in Taiwan. It's the U.S. government funding these media organizations, or it's the Democratic Progressive Party through the Taiwan Foundation for Democracy, which is a subsidiary of the National Endowment for Democracy. A lot of people don't know all of this. Of course, the Western media isn't going to say any of this, but what I like to do is just show people their own official website and where they admit all of this.
You know, they're part of that 300 million annual anti-China budget. It's interesting how much the American government spends on trying to, change people's mind. I mean, I like that they're spending so much of it in Taiwan because, the mainlanders, they're not watching YouTube. First of all, let me clear something up when people use this term. YouTube is banned in China. Facebook is banned in China. I'm going to be clear with you guys. First of all, the average Chinese person, I live in a major city here, a city of 32 million people. Okay, this is a mega city. It's almost the population of Canada right outside that window. They don't care about YouTube, guys. They don't care about Facebook. They got Bilibili. They got the Douyin, which is the parent company to TikTok, by the way. So enjoy that application in the West. They don't care. They have Sequoia. They have all their social networking platforms. And guess what? They can criticize their government on it. There's lots of criticizing of the government here. Yes, the Chinese can bitch and complain if they want about what's going on. They can yell at the local community leader that they might have a pothole out front of their house. They can do that. But where it's really misunderstood is you got to think about this weapon. This weapon is social media that has been used in America to silence your own president, to take him right off the air. Now, do you want to have an organization let run wild in a country of 1.5 million that can actually strip a president from social networks in a so-called democracy of the United States where they're claiming there's freedom of speech? Sorry, there ain't. You can't say that it's freedom of speech. No, they're silenced. They're either canceled or completely, a lot of big names have left YouTube because, well, they're either kicked off or they're being canceled out there. So when the agreement was very clear many years ago, and the Americans have the same agreement unilaterally. If you're going to put a country or a company in the United States of America, it's going to be a social network, you got to hand over the keys to the NSA. Very clear, very clear. If you're going to come over to a country of 1.5 billion and allow Facebook and YouTube to be massive propaganda machines, these guys aren't stupid. Wake up. You have a political party that is absolutely responsible to the people. And people, you can say what you want. You can call me a CPC shill. I don't care. All I know is outside that door in a city of 32 million people, I have been here over a year and a half now. I haven't seen not one single homeless person on the streets ever. Nowhere. It hasn't existed. That's not part of the society here. The people hold their governments accountable here. And what do they get in return? Brand new airports, 60,000 kilometers of bullet trains. Somebody mentioned something about the pollution. Alex, talk about the pollution. 310 days of clean air quality here in Chongqing, a city that was a major mega industrial city 20 years ago. Go look at my videos, blue sky. How can I fake blue sky, guys? I mean, this is the really misunderstanding about China. It's absolutely crazy. And that's why I love your reporting on Thailand, Brian. I asked a guy who's a protester when I was in Thailand last time. I said, what are you protesting for? And he says, well, what kind of question is that? I said, well, you know, what do you do? He says, I'm a law student. I said, okay, well, tell me something that Thailand doesn't allow you to do. Just give me 2 things. I said, can you practice religion? He says, yeah. I said, can you go out to the bar? Yeah. Can you have drinks? Can you smoke cigarettes? Can you drive a fast speed? What can't you do? And he says, well, my friends, I needed to join my friends because they were doing it. And I said, well, why were they protesting? Well, one of the persons that organized it, and there we go into the organization, getting these young minds to believe that there's something that they're totally missing, even though they got a good job, they can do anything, they can go to the bars. I'm talking about the Thai. The Thais, a great, fantastic country. You can enjoy food, practice whatever religion you want to do, but yet the NGOs that are infiltrating the universities are corrupting these kids' minds to think that they're missing out on something big. But you know, anyway, AJ, welcome back.
Hey, I got to explain myself, guys. You know, I work for the government, and obviously, I'm actually working from home today, and I'm doing this live stream. Somebody has told my department I'm on this live stream, so somebody has actually this word has spread. So my boss was calling me.
Do you want to vacate and Brian and I will run the rest?
No. My boss was actually calling me, and he said, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And he said, "Is this some sort of security risk?" And I said, "No, I'm just doing a live stream, and blah blah blah. You know, we're just talking." So
welcome,
I just left it there. Yeah. So first of all, I have no idea how the new. I think we got about 2,000 viewers or so. I think maybe somebody is in here that shouldn't be in here, and word has spread to my workplace. But it doesn't really matter, guys, because I'm already. A lot of you who follow my channel will know that I've already been sent a letter, which I'll have to leave the office in the next few months. They are making huge redundancies in the civil service, so I've only got a couple months left anyway, so they can't really sack me, to be honest. They have to follow the process. So I've got nothing to worry about. This live stream will continue. So don't worry about it, guys. No, it's fine. I that's the same thing I told my boss. I said, look, you know, end of the day, you know, I'm talking. Whatever you guys want to do to me, you can do to me, but you know, that's not going to change. I'm still leaving in a couple of months, so I thought I'd explain that to the viewers why I went missing. Had to explain.
Well, here's a good test for freedom of speech. Let you
so yeah, so this is why, guys, in UK you cannot really say what's in your mind. People, you know, especially when you're working for the government, people clamp down on you very hard. People try and stop you from speaking the truth. That's the problem we're having in the West. I mean, just give you an example with Assange, you know, and see how he's been treated. You know, the problem with the democracy in the West doesn't really exist. It's just a sham. It's just a sham, making people think they got freedom. They don't really have any freedom. You know, reality-wise, you know, people really can't say what they want and do what they want. You know, you know, we have this place in the UK called the Speaker's Corner, and that's supposed to be an area in London where you have freedom of speech. And there are YouTube videos. You're welcome to check it out, guys, if you don't believe me. There are YouTube videos how police would arrest people for speaking their minds in Speaker's Corner. Wow. Especially during the times when COVID, when people were talking about obviously COVID stuff, they would get arrested in Speaker's Corner. There's no real freedom, and you're welcome to, you know, Google it or YouTube it, how police arrest people in Speaker's Corner for speaking their minds. And it doesn't really exist, guys. Anyway, over to you. I don't know what you guys were talking about. Please continue finishing, and then we'll move on to China and Taiwan after that.
Yeah, we kind of were wading into China. So we're kind of in it, but we haven't really, I guess, officially started talking about the real serious issue. But Alex was talking about the media, and I was saying how information space for a country is as important to protect as your airspace, your shores, your land borders. If you just let another country and its corporations and the fact that Facebook and Twitter work with the U.S. State Department, I don't even think that is a secret. There are New York Times articles about the Arab Spring where they admit that Facebook and Twitter and Google, they were doing these training sessions all the way as early as 2008. So that was years before the 2011 Arab Spring. They were getting these specific groups that participated in that unrest ready years in advance. And it was big tech with the State Department doing it in tandem. If you were to allow Facebook or Twitter into China's information space, it would be used as a weapon, just like if you let a tank roll in over the border. That is why China has its own social media alternatives, has its own information space, its own infrastructure. Other nations need to see the necessity of doing this. I've said many times that nations like Russia and China that have their own social media networks, what they need to do is they import weapons from Russia and China to protect all of these other domains, air, land, sea. Why aren't you importing platforms from these countries to protect your information space as well? Because Twitter and Facebook here in Thailand do not reflect the best interests of the Thai people. It reflects the best interests of the U.S. State Department working with them for regime change to try to overthrow the government. And not just the government, not just the politicians in power right now, the entire system. They want to overthrow the entire system. And it's not to make the country better or to steal everything the country has. They will steal everything Thailand has, but it will be to wreck it because they know they have nothing better to offer Thailand than China does. And so if they can't have it, they will wreck it. They will surround China with a burning wasteland. China will be isolated because they won't have anyone to trade with. This is what they're doing to Myanmar right next door. The exact same process, the NED behind all of these opposition groups. Aung San Suu Kyi literally had white men from Australia, from the UK, working for her as her inner circle, rewriting the constitution, reworking the legal system. It was unbelievable. And the Western media will say, well, there was a coup because Myanmar is a dictatorship and they wanted Aung San Suu Kyi out because she was representing the people. No, she represented Washington, London, and they uprooted their puppet in Myanmar. And it's the same story for every country here in Southeast Asia. I've not really dug too deeply into Indonesia, but I have dug deeply into Myanmar, Malaysia, Cambodia, and of course Thailand, and a little bit into Vietnam. And it's the same case in every single situation is the same case. And if you look at a map of where the NED is meddling, where there have been violent conflicts, where there are U.S. troops, you can see it is a ring completely surrounding China. It's unmistakable.
I also wanted to bring up South Korea and Japan as well. I don't know if you realize about this Chip 4 bill that they recently Biden signed. And not only is the USA destroying its own economy, I mean, we're talking about $1.5 trillion worth of stocks in US companies, semiconductor companies who have lost value. But now they are trying to destroy the Japanese and the South Korean economy as well. They have banned South Korean companies from operating in China. They have banned Japanese companies from operating in China. They've banned them from selling high-end semiconductor equipment and semiconductor chips to China. Now, it's not about them having their own trade war. Now they want to bring their allies into it and make sure they take them down with them. I mean, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, look, end of the day, it's the US companies that lose out, and the South Korean companies lose out, Japanese companies lose out. imagine this: if you're a company and you spend years of research building this high-end chip, but then you find out you can't sell it to your biggest customer. China is the biggest customer. I mean, China is the factory of the world. Imagine how many chips they use on a daily basis, fit them into their IoT devices, cars, and other electrical equipment that they send around the world. I mean, China is the largest company. Imagine you spend years researching this chip and suddenly being told you can't sell it to your biggest customer. What are you going to do? I mean, and when China develops its own semiconductor sector, and they will, I mean, they are already, they've already built 7 nanometers, I believe, SMRC, and it will take them years.
5
Yeah,
now.
5, and yeah, it will take them a couple more years, maybe 5 years, but they will catch up. And imagine if China does catch up, how are the Americans going to sell their chips to China, because they won't need them anymore. They're completely destroying not only their economy now, but the future. I mean, just to give you an example of Chinese technology, they stopped the Chinese from being part of the International Space Station. They banned the Chinese. They said, oh, first of all, Chinese cannot offer us anything. Secondly, it's a big security risk. 5-10 years later, China's now has got the best space industry in the world. They've got space stations happening. They've got a moon landing happening very soon. They're going to be mining the moon. They're well ahead of United States, and they're well ahead of the Artemis program. I mean, what do you guys think? Well, why are they doing this? I mean, is there no one with any common sense thinking this is just not going to work? Is there no one standing up and saying, hang on a second, what are you guys doing? Well, what do you think, Brian? And we'll go to Alex and we'll talk about the stocks and stuff.
Well, the people making the decisions, this is a foreign policy that spans decades. If you go into State Department documents from right after World War II, they talk about is preventing the Soviet Union or China from becoming peer or near peer competitors. They were going to eliminate them, and they wanted to maintain hegemony over the planet. This has always been the plan. And back then they had this plan to do, all of this regime change, to try to get into China's markets and work them from the inside and putting pressure on them on the outside. The Tiananmen protests that we always hear a certain version of these events in the Western media. That was an attempt. That was regime change attempt by the U.S. I got a bug flying in my room. Just if I'm swatting at something, I'm not losing my mind. So that was the plan, but these plans were created in a different time, and they were not thinking about technology leveling the playing field. They were not thinking about this disparity between the West and the rest of the world in terms of technology ever closing, but it has. And they're looking at the chip industry, and they're just trying to think of anything they can do to slow down or reverse China's rise. And this is one of the many, many ways they're thinking about doing it. They obviously cannot do it by competing, so they're cheating, and they're ruining everything. They're just blocking China from getting the tools. This is not competition. You're going out to deliberately hurt China's economy. So the Chip 4 alliance, this was supposed to, the way they sold it was the United States, Taiwan, Japan, South Korea. They're all going to join forces. They're going to create this massive world-class ecosystem, supply chains, research and development. But really all it was making South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan transfer their intellectual property and technology to the U.S., to U.S. companies, and like you said, restrict their access to China's markets. They're not able to do anything with China. And South Korea, for example, has huge investments, multi-billion-dollar investments in China, and it's also a huge market where they sell things as well, just as you said. So it really is another one of these examples. We see how Ukraine self-destructed because it was a U.S. proxy used against Russia to hurt Russia and destroying itself in the process. That's the Chip 4 alliance. It's to get South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan to destroy their chip industries. The U.S. picking up the broken pieces or anything valuable left over, in the hopes that at the end of it, China was knocked down a peg and the U.S. comes out stronger. That is the whole point of it. Of course, even American companies like NVIDIA, they They make, they make billions in China, and now they cannot. And they even said, "You're doing this. Where do you think all of our R&D money comes from? It comes from selling large amounts of our products. Now you're cutting China off from our products. They can't use our chips, our boards, our graphic processors. Okay, but now we can't do research and development at the same pace. China is eventually going to catch up. Again, just as you said. I don't know if people know this, but China graduates millions more every single year in the field of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And even in terms of PhDs in these fields, thousands more. And by 2025, they say it'll be twice as many in China than the United States. That type of, these human resources that China is investing in and growing its disparity between where it is and where the US is, it's just going to grow and grow and grow. And they are going to catch up. They're also going to surpass the United States. And what the US is doing is not only are they inevitably going to lose, but they're not going to hold any share in the prosperity that China gets once they reach the top. The US is doing that to themselves unnecessarily. They could work among all of these other nations and compete and cooperate like a normal country, but they won't. They're painting themselves into this corner where they are estranging themselves to everyone.
So, Alex, you know a lot about stocks and shares. How do you think these companies are feeling watching their stock values go down 40%, 60%? And, we're talking about 1.5 trillion here. We're not talking small change. What do you think is going through these minds of these American semiconductor companies?
I think that it's not the CEO's fault of these publicly traded companies. It's not the shareholders' fault, but this is completely a government that is really messing with fire here. In a matter of fact, if you go back to March 2020 and you look at the trading on the S&P when the pandemic was announced, you will see the market quickly dropped 43 to 45% within a 3 or 4 week period. Then the Americans hit the panic button, pumped the paper into the market, and the market took a bit of time and it rebounded. The true value of some of these companies that are trading on the S&P, and that's a Standard & Poor's. For some of you people that aren't aware of this index, it's the United States top 500 index companies by market cap. In a blink of an eye, if you pull the Chinese market out of these companies, you will see one of the largest collection of ghost companies ever seen. The balance sheets of some of these companies are actually worth nothing. Look at how much money Boeing has borrowed over the last couple of years. Everybody says, yeah, well, that's debt to equity, Alex. That's debt to equity. Well, if you shut off the buying channel, for example, outside these doors here, there's 3 brand new malls across the street. 60% of the stores in those malls are American, whether it's Starbucks, whether it's, other major brands. Tesla, for example, is a brand here that's selling. Adidas, you have European brands, but some of these brands are very, very exposed here in China. And if you take out the Chinese customer, the consumer, these are the consumers that are holding up the balance sheets of these S&P companies. You pull the plug on those, and here's a figure that I want you guys to kind of write down. This is not a prediction. This is not investment advice. But the 2200 handle for the S&P of March of 2023, keep an eye on it. Let's see, maybe if everything goes well geopolitically, we might avoid it. If everything goes to hell in a handbasket, that 2200 handle of the S&P could blow through it very fast. And I'm not just making this up. You can see the bets on the derivatives markets that are ensuring that position on the S&P. Many banks are buying protection for that level of March of 2023. It could be nothing, or it could be something catastrophic. But the moment that you start flirting with your consumers of 1.5 billion that have been holding up your balance sheets, and I know there's a lot of people out there that says, the hell with China, who cares about China? We don't need China. Sorry, you do. If you have any money in the market, you need them. If you have any business that is importing, you need them. I don't care what your opinion is about the political party here, but you need this consumer, you need this country, you need these places that, Huawei, major R&D company. And even to show politeness to our American corporations, the Chinese have actually opened up the courts here and allowed American companies to come in here and defend their intellectual properties against some Chinese companies here. Yes, they have done that. That is true. So all this bad negative energy here, the Chinese don't want. They want America to grow. They want to prosper. They want both nations to work together to move forward. What a great thing if two nations would do that. Win-win, exactly. Yeah. But do you see $100 billion leaving the bank accounts of China to go to some war in a country that is full of corruption? You don't see 1 yuan leave this country. And that's my point on it.
You're right, Alex. I lived in China 10 years ago, and I can tell you that it's very, very difficult to move money out of China. And I was actually looking for ways to move my money out of China, because I had a job in China at the time, and I put it into a bank account. And at this time, I wanted to go back to UK, and I was trying to move it to UK, and I couldn't. I had to ask a lot of people. I had to fly through a lot of hoops. And that money stayed in China, and I couldn't move it out. But it's so easy to move money from other countries, European countries, into China, but it's very, very difficult to move it out of China. And now that China's blocked cryptocurrency as well, it's made it even more difficult. And everyone knows how PayPal has been. PayPal is not a trusted source anymore. So if you want to move money out of PayPal, good luck to you, because they will keep that money and you will lose it. But let's go to Taiwan now. I mean, I said to you that about how United States is using South Korea and Japan for their trade wars and destroying their own economy. But what if there is a physical war? And it feels to me that United States has got a brand new doctrine where they use other people as resources, as guinea pigs, as pawns to fight their wars. And they're fighting Ukraine to the every last Ukrainian. When they fought in Iraq in the second Iraq war, they called it the coalition of the willing, and they brought a lot of UN troops, NATO troops, and other troops from around the world. And it seems that US is fighting this new war where they fight from a distance, but they use other countries' resources as pawns. We're talking about people, resources, and Japan and South Korea right on their firing line if there was ever a hot war within Taiwan. And you got 50,000 troops in Japan, 40,000 troops in South Korea. And if there was ever a hot war, you cannot discount that United States will send troops, fire rockets from South Korea or Japan, get these two countries involved. And I want to include Australia as well, by the way. I mean, is this what you see happening, Brian? They're going to use other countries as cannon fodder for a war with China, and they will completely burn South Korea and Japan and Australia to the ground while fighting China, while keeping themselves at a distance, because we know that United States will not bring its aircraft carriers anywhere near the Taiwanese borders, because they will be sunk with China's hypersonic missiles. It would be too risky for them. And if there was a war, I think do you think that the United States will find more of a sneaky war? And I say sneaky war because there's a white paper. It's in Google. You're welcome to search for it. There was a white paper during the Obama years where they were talking about if there was ever a hot war with China, they will block all trade routes with China. And this is one of the reasons why China went ahead and, building this BRI and because if United States blocked the Malacca Strait, for example, and Suez Canal, it would cause major problems for China in terms of trade. They won't be able to get energy, raw materials. But with the BRI, this is why they fast-track the BRI, and this is one of the main reasons. Do you think they will fight wars like that? Obviously, the United States is a blue water navy, and they've got 800 bases around the world, and they will try and stifle China rather than going into China's borders, getting sunk. Is that the kind of war you think they might fight? And they will use South Korea, they will use Japan as cannon fodder, as well as Australia. Is that what you think that will happen?
You're bringing up a lot of really good points. That is basically what they're thinking of doing. You have to remember, right now, if you look at the economy of Japan or South Korea, or if you look at Taiwan, its economy depends on the rest of China. Without it, it will not exist. It'll crater and disappear. Just like Ukraine. Without the Russian economy, with all these ties and cooperation that Ukraine had with Russia, it would collapse. But once it collapses, these are desperate people. They have no ties with Russia. They really, and you're radicalizing the population. They really have nothing to lose by fighting Russia with the promise of getting into the EU and all of this prosperity that is never, ever coming. And it's kind of the same process. We were just talking about the Chip 4 Alliance, how it's going to destroy Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan's chip industry, how the US is going to strip mine it. They're going to be losing billions by cutting off themselves from China. And then that will be one less reason for the leadership in, say, Tokyo or Seoul to hesitate before joining some war with the United States against China. Their policy papers, just as you said, I think it's called War with China. I think that's the title of it, and it's from the Rand Corporation. Yep. And that is what they talk about. If they can shut down the shipping, even without doing a blockade, just the threat of shipping being in danger from ongoing warfare, this would be enough for most shipping companies not to want to send their ships to Chinese ports. This is their rationale, and that the Chinese economy will be devastated much more so than the U.S. economy. At the end of it, the U.S. will come out stronger. But I bet they believe that in terms of Russia too. If we put all these sanctions on Russia, we blow up the NordStream pipelines, Russia will be buried and out of business and decimated economically, and we'll be stronger on the other side. But it doesn't really look like that's happening, because Russia and China, here's the problem the Western policy-making circles have. They honestly believe that they're superior, that Russians, the Chinese people, somehow they're inferior. No matter how many things they have going for them to their advantage, they're just fundamentally inferior to the West, to white West people. I hate to be blunt like that, but this is how they think. And if people looking at U.S. foreign policy say, no, that it's not racist, of course it is. Of course it is. Now, they believe that, but it is a false premise. China is by no means inferior, fundamentally inferior. They're just as smart, just as hardworking. And as I said, they have all of these things to their advantage. 5 times the population, millions more graduating in relevant fields that will actually feed into the economy, and high-tech fields that benefit the military as well. All of these things are going to inevitably have China surpass the US and the collective West. China has a larger population than the G7 combined. So their premise is that they can strangle China because they're inferior. They're not going to figure out a way around all of these obstacles we're putting up for them. They already are. They already are figuring out ways around it. Russia already is finding ways around these obstacles. If you try to close off shipping to China, like you said, the Belt and Road Initiative, these are overland routes to move goods. There's also a northern route across northern Russia. They've
Yep.
got nuclear-powered icebreakers, clearing that out. That'll be an alternative. And they're building pipelines between Russia and China. So this is all something they're preparing for. And every single day that goes by, they're more prepared. And the U.S., all of these tricks that they had, all of these blades they had sharpened or blunted a little more each day.
Yeah, and don't forget the huge EV industry in China as well. So every year goes past, China needs less and less oil to drive these cars because they're all going to be run by EV, and obviously a huge push of renewables as well. So every year that goes past, China needs less fossil fuels. We got 10 minutes left, guys. Alex, do you want to bring up any other topics? I'll let you.
I did try to. I've been just messaging Patrick Lancaster here on my phone. I said, Patrick, send us out a message to the audience. He's currently in quite a interesting zone right now in the Ukraine, and he's going to try to get a voice message for us three. I told him that we were on the show today, and I said if he can send us a voice update, that would be great. I really like what Brian was talking about in regards to China and your evaluation on how the U.S. actually do believe in their own bullshit. It's quite remarkable. We've all heard of people that are preppers, that are prepping for, the end of the world, or if inflation. I mean, actually, it's quite brilliant to anybody that's bought a lot of stuff in preparation to inflation. Is quite smart. Well, imagine a country of 1.5 billion being a prepper country. That's China. This government is stockpiling everything you can imagine. And if the bloody sun went out or burned out tomorrow, I'd be pretty interested. It'd probably be the only nation left standing, because these guys are pretty much planning for anything, okay? They're not naive and thinking, they're sitting back and they're watching very closely what's going on, okay? And they're being mature about it, saying, try the diplomatic route. They don't want to get involved in this. They're too busy. They're too busy building 60,000 kilometers of railway track for high-speed trains. They're too busy building solar farms, wind farms. As AJ said, EV business. I'm in Chongqing. There's EV cars everywhere. You got to be careful when you cross the street because they're so silent. You got to really be careful in a city of 30-some million, where I would say a majority of the new vehicles on the road are EV vehicles. It's pretty crazy. No, AJ, I just want to commend you for your dedication on YouTube and your dedication to your audience. You and Brian, I used to do a fair amount of live streams early on in my channel, and you guys have both inspired me to bring back the Let's Talk China show on Sundays. Your determination that you guys continue to work through. I mean, AJ, I'm sorry about what happened today.
It's all right.
Unfortunate event at work.
I look at the big picture in the day. Work is work, but to spread the truth, to make people listen to the truth and make them understand what goes on, that is more important, to send that message out. But work is work. Money is money in the day. End of the day, money comes, money goes. That's not important. I mean, if I wanted a safe life, I could have just sat at home with the missus, enjoyed my life, and watched your channel, watched Brian's channel. I would have just sat there and enjoyed my life like that. But sometimes you got to do the difficult things in life, but you don't do it for the profit, because you really don't make much on YouTube. But you don't do it for the fame. I certainly don't do it for the fame, because my picture's not even up.
Well, and I just wanted to say, Brian, your reporting is really, really balancing a lot of opinions out there that were really swayed or convinced or propagandized by the American government. That machine is a huge machine to go against. I admire your courage, and same with you, AJ. We know that what we're doing is pretty risky. We know we're going against the grain. Hell, if we wanted to have channels 10 times more population, all we'd have to do is go on the hate scene and follow everybody else's BS, but that is not what we do. And again, thank you so much for dedicating some of your time tonight, Brian, to share the screen with AJ. And of course, Mia, I'm very blessed that both of you guys invited me along. And please, Brian,
we've beat the record, Alex.
Sorry?
We've beat the record. We've got 2,000 people have, on average for the past hour or two, I guess. So it's been a really good success.
Brian, I know it's hard work. Trust me, I do it every day here at my job as well. Don't give up. Just keep pushing forward. I know it's tremendously hard dedication work, but you have the support of hundreds of thousands of people. And, my hat is off to you, sir. Thank you.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be on. I'm happy to do it. I appreciate other people coming out and speaking up. I also appreciate all of the people who support us so that we can continue doing this. I do this because I watched the U.S., its machine, its lies, burn the city that I live in, try to burn it down twice, and bring war weapons into the streets. I have kids now. I cannot afford to allow this to happen and be silent about it. I have to speak up. When you see it happening in the places the people being affected, then when you see it on the news someplace like Syria or in Ukraine, it takes on a whole new level of meaning. It's personal. It's personal, and it's unnecessary. When you look at all of these countries in Southeast Asia, all of their differences, different religions, different historical backgrounds, even today, different objectives, political objectives, and yet they're still able to get along more or less without resorting to conflict, without being childish and nasty and trying to isolate each other. They don't always get along, and it's far, far from perfect. But this unipolar world order of the United States, where it has to pull everyone down, it allows nobody to prosper so that it can lord over everyone. This has to end. I don't know if multipolarism is going to be perfect. Probably not, but it's going to be better than what we're going through right now. You can already see how the playing field is being leveled. You could already see people's lives, say like in Laos, improving in ways they never would have if the U.S. continued dominating this region. People are prospering more now than ever, specifically because the corrosive influence of Washington and Wall Street is fading here. I think it's something worth fighting for, to see people get a chance to live a normal life and not have to worry about war or poverty or sickness. These are things that shouldn't be hanging over our collective heads. It's the year 2022. We have the ability to get past all of this. And there's a small handful of malice people trying to hold it back. And we just got to keep working. It's not going to happen overnight. This problem wasn't created overnight, but we have to just keep chipping away at it. What other choice do we have? I don't see what other choice I have.
I'm fairly new in this YouTube world. I haven't been here for years. I've probably been around for maybe just over a year. And I too, like everyone else, was brainwashed once upon a time. I used to believe everything in the BBC. I used to believe what I was seeing in social media, and everything changed. I have traveled around. I've been to China and stuff, and I just couldn't believe. There was a time when UK had a very good relationship with China. It was the golden years. President Xi Jinping was shown around Buckingham Palace. He met the Queen. David Cameron took him to the local pub, and I thought things were looking up. And that was a time when I was in China, and everything was great. Came back to UK. A couple of years later, suddenly everything changed. Trump came into power and started this ridiculous trade war. And I had this Huawei phone, and overnight my Huawei phone just became useless. I'm thinking, what's going on? They just sanctioned the whole Huawei phone, and it's just become useless. And then I had some good Chinese friends as well I used to get along with. And one of my good Chinese friends, he got beaten up in the streets and he got sent into a coma because there was a lot of anti-Chinese sentiment going on because of all this racism coming out of the United States with Trump saying it's a Kung Flu, and Mike Pompeo being absolutely racist against the Chinese. So Chinese people were getting beaten up in UK, and one of my good friends got sent into coma. And I thought to myself, you know what, I need to speak out about this. This is not right. And so I started the YouTube channel, started to speak out about it. And then I started, learning from, you guys, listening to your channels. Alex was one of the first channels I followed, actually. And then I found you, Brian, and I listened to you guys, listening to Duran. And it completely changed my outlook in a year. I mean, almost like 2 years ago, I was like everybody else in UK. I was completely oblivious what was happening around the world. And it just goes to show, if I can do it, anyone can do it. All you need is just a bit of common sense. Go out there, do your own research, listen to the right channels on YouTube, question everything, and your mind will open, just like mine did. And nowadays, I walk around the streets and I speak to UK people, and people are just so oblivious, exactly how I was before. And people, nowadays, people are more interested what happens in Love Island than what's happening around the world. And you see what's happening in UK with inflation rising, cost of living rising. You see, people losing their homes. But where are the protests? I mean, you've seen the protests in France, you've seen the protests in Germany, but there's nothing in UK. People are still oblivious to what's happening around the world. And I just can't believe it, because I think the British government have done a very good job in dumbing down the people here. And I speak to everyday people. They're completely oblivious to what's going on. They don't understand why they have this cost of living. They don't understand why their gas prices have gone up. They blame Putin, for example. And I'm just, I'm just face palming myself, thinking, oh my God, is this what British people have become? And yeah, this is why, I think it's really important for me to kind of spread this message out and try and, even if I can get one person to change, question everything, become open-minded, and start listening to you guys and start listening to the right channel. If I can if I can change one person's mind, then I've done a good job. I just think it's really important to have channels like ourselves, like you, Brian, like you, Alex, and educate people, because people need educating, and there are a lot of people like I was, that they still have not had their mind opened yet. And imagine if everybody in this world had their minds open and listening to you guys, everybody will stand up and nobody will take any crap from the government. They'll be like, what did you say? No, we're not standing for that. It's crazy. But yeah, I really commend you guys. I mean, there's not many of us out there. You just have to count how many channels there are speaking the truth. And I can count less than 10. You got, there's obviously the Duran and Gonzalo Lira and a few others, but there's hardly anyone else. You have these big YouTube channels with millions of followers, millions of subs, talking a lot of crap. I'm talking about Visual Politic, which I used to follow once. Now they're just spurting out lots of junk and crap. TLDR and Caspian Reports, many other great big YouTube channels. Overnight, they just became shills for the West. And it's a shame, guys. But yeah, I just really want to commend you guys for doing what you're doing. I really want to thank all the viewers who have come in today and listening to us blabbering on. I know a lot of you have taken out some precious time to listening to us, so we really, really appreciate it. We've had almost 2,000 viewers, which has been a record. So I really want to thank everyone who has tuned in. And that's it for me, guys. Anything you want to finish up with?
No, just say thank you for having me on, and it's great to be back on the screen with you as well, Alex, and both of you. Keep it up.
Can I just say, will you come on again, Brian, and speak to us a bit more? There's so much more to talk about, and we'd like to have you on board regularly. There's so much to speak about in this world, and really appreciate your time. Brilliant.
Yes.
Alex, you want to finish up?
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody, if you haven't subscribed to Brian's channel, the links are in the description below for some extensive, investigative work that he does. And of course, if you're coming in from Brian's channel as well, don't forget to subscribe to AJ's channel, PTE. They're all in the links below. Mine is Reportify Media. coming out of China, giving you information. If we change some minds tonight, we've accomplished something. And I think that is a goal that all of us are trying to do here. Again, what a great evening and what a pleasure to be on your program, AJ. I look forward to being here again, and it's nice to be kind of a guest on your show, you know. It's cool. And let's do this again. And Brian, definitely, let's try to do something together as well when we bring back one of my shows coming up in the future. But again, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. AJ, let me know how you want to shut down the show tonight. Do you want to keep the chat open for a couple of minutes while people can say goodbye to each other? You got quite the audience.
Yes,
I
please.
don't think
That's
a hard
the best
cut
way.
would be the best way to just stop the show. So
Exactly. Before you guys go, can any of you answer this question from a super chat, Elena Diaz? I don't know whether you guys want to quickly answer it, because I think we should really answer the super chats. We shouldn't really leave these alone. So
Sure.
do you want to do it?
I'll give it a stab. China knows that if Russia fails in Ukraine, they're next. They're going to be next. And everything that we've seen the U.S. attempt to subject Russia to or subject Russia to, it'll be off the scale when it comes to China. Think about the Russophobia that we see permeating Western society. Just think about how bad this will be when the West turns all of this onto China. There's always been this racism underneath the surface. I mean, this whole thing blew up with Trump's trade war, but they have been talking about doing this for decades, and they've been putting the pieces into place, and they have been playing their games for decades. It will be so much worse when it is China's turn. So people say, oh, I saw some comment that someone made somewhere in China. I don't think they're still supporting Russia anymore in Ukraine. They absolutely are. They know this is zero sum. If Russia goes, they're next. They know this. So I don't think they'll openly declare war, but I think they will do everything within their power to ensure that Russia succeeds.
Yep. All right. Thanks, Brian. So
Sure.
let's put this to a close. How do we stop this? I mean, this is
no problem. How about AJ?
I work in the IG sector, but I don't know.
No worries, my friend. Sit back. I'll exit to everyone, and
Okay,
we'll play a bit of music. So you guys will see you guys all in the comment box. It's nice goodbye here from China and Brian in Thailand.
And Brian, if you hang
Fantastic
around,
country.
we would just want to say goodbyes
Sure.
backstage. So
Sure.